folks, I'm Matt, and welcome to The Good Trouble Show. In September of 2023, the media went wild when two mummified bodies were rolled out at Mexico's Congress by controversial UFO figure Jaime Maussan. Jaime claimed that the mummies were of non-human origin and were recovered in a cave near Nazca, Peru, where the world-famous Peru Nazca lions are obviously located. Critics immediately claimed the whole thing was a hoax, explaining that the mummies were made of nothing but animal bones to make these strange little creatures. Another scientist claimed that the mummies were actually a delectable treat. Yeah, now I'm pretty hungry. I must admit, though, I did think the whole thing was a giant hoax, which is why I never covered it on the show. But it turns out that I was likely wrong. And today we have Dr. Richard O'Connor, medical doctor, MD, to discuss the peer-reviewed paper that concludes that these mummies are actually not made of cake, but they're rather real corpses of what appears to be extraterrestrial beings. So, yeah, pretty crazy, huh? But first, please hit the subscribe and thumbs up buttons on YouTube. Leave a comment and let us know what you think about this episode. You can also find us on X or Twitter at Good Trouble Show. And of course, everywhere else, we're at The Good Trouble Show. Maybe one day Elon will up the number of characters that you can have for your X handle, so I can have them all match. You can also find us wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Just search for The Good Trouble Show with Matt Ford. And as always, we need your help keeping the lights on. You can become a Patreon member of The Good Trouble Show by going to www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. Sign up and you can support this, hopefully one day Emmy-winning program. Anyway, and also as well, finally, super chats are open on YouTube. It's another great way to support The Good Trouble Show, and we always appreciate everybody chipping in. Our Patreon subscribership and YouTube subscribership has slowly been going up, so we very, very much appreciate that. I also want to thank our existing Patreon and YouTube members and our chat moderators who volunteer their time every Sunday when we do one of these live shows to keep the chat room from going bananas. And of course, all of you at home that are watching this, our show is nothing without having an amazing audience, and we very much appreciate the generosity of your time. And as always, we would love for you to tell your friends about us. We're a little bit slow to grow, but as always, these sorts of things, they grow by word of mouth. Okay, moving on. Today's guest is a Baylor College of Medicine graduate and a board-certified anesthesiologist who in 2011 founded the Jesse A. Marcel Library, focusing on the UFO phenomenon. Please welcome Dr. O'Connor. Dr. O'Connor, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Very happy to be here, Matthew. Thanks for inviting me to talk.
No, you're very welcome. So just to tell everyone at home, you're out in the middle of the wilderness there, and the internet is a little bit wonky, so we may have a little bit of delays. We're going to play your PowerPoint that I saw on the Jesse Marcel Library website, and some of the audio on some of the clips that we'll play off of that may kind of cut in and out. But in the YouTube description, we have a link to that, and we would encourage everyone to watch this entire presentation. It is really something else. So, Dr. O'Connor, obviously, thank you very much for joining us, taking time out of your Sunday. So, tell us a bit about yourself and your professional background.
Well, I got, I finished Baylor College of Medicine and did my residency in anesthesia in the University of Miami, and did a fellowship in cardiac and pediatric anesthesia at UC Davis Medical Center in Sacramento. And sort of before I started anesthesia, I worked in general practice in the Central Valley of the San Joaquin Valley in California. Working with primarily with migrant farm workers there who are vital to our nation and our economy. And so while I was doing that, I picked up some Spanish, which has been helpful to me in life, and was one of the reasons that I probably latched on to what's going on with the Nazca Mummies earlier than some people did. But anyway, after finishing my fellowship at UC Davis, I came to Helena, Montana, and joined the medical staff of St. Peter's Hospital here in Helena. And one of the people that I worked with, one of the surgeons that I met early on, was Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr., who was an ear, nose, and throat surgeon here in Helena. And he was in his active private practice when I started doing anesthesia. So, of course, he and I met and worked together quite a bit in the operating room here at our hospital. And probably a year into knowing him, I somehow heard about his involvement with Roswell. And so, I approached him about it and asked him what that was all about. And he told me the same thing that he's told you and everybody else that's heard his story. But, just working with him for about 10 years, I worked with Dr. Marcel, and I knew him before he passed away. I knew him for over 25 years. And, I knew him well. And having known him well, I can reassure everybody here that's listening that Dr. Marcel's story of being involved in the Roswell UFO crash event and handling that material and closely inspecting it, holding it in his hands, he and his father and his mother, that all happened for sure. I just guarantee you that it happened because I knew the man well enough to know that he would never, ever have made up any of that story. He just wasn't that kind of a person. He was an amazing physician and an American soldier, a patriot, a helicopter pilot for the Montana National Guard. At age 68, he went to Iraq and served there as a flight surgeon and a helicopter pilot. And he was actually even in the Navy early in his life, and was blackening his face on board a ship during the Cuban Missile Crisis, ready to invade Cuba.
Wow.
So, this man, people don't realize all the things that he did in his life and just what an excellent person he was. So I've known since I met him in 1988 that we're not alone on this planet. And as you can see here, in our first slide, this Milky Way galaxy, 100 billion planetary systems, and 21.6 sextillion planets in the observable universe. That's 21.6 times 10 to the 23rd. And as I've written there, when it gets beyond about 10 to the 9th, I'm like, my brain cannot go any further than 10 to the 9th. So sure. 10 to the 23rd is just incredible. And this article here that you see in the first slide where it says, new research on intelligent life within our own galaxy, they estimate, I guess, using the Drake equation or some modification of the Drake equation, that there's probably a 30 active communicating civilizations in our Milky Way galaxy. And somehow some of them have arrived here. And, if people have looked at Dr. Kevin Newth's paper that he published that was titled Estimating the Flight Characteristics of Unknown Anomalous Phenomena or Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. I forget what journal that was published in, but in his looking at the accelerations of the object that was described by Kevin Day aboard the USS Nimitz and the radar data supplied by Kevin Day, Dr. Newth estimated that the accelerations that this UFO presented, that if it could be sustained in space, that it would take days to weeks to travel light years, So people that have said that they can't get here from there, that's not right. They can get here from there, and they have.
Yeah,
And so,
I think there tends to be a lot of sort of oversimplification that you'll see from the debunkers and whatnot. Hey, do me a favor, just slide your chair just slightly to your left, just so I kind of center you up a little bit more in the. There we go, awesome. So I want to jump back a little bit. So
yes.
So obviously, Mr. Marcel or Dr. Marcel, he did a lot for ufology and clearly did a lot for medicine and this country. Was on the UAP issue and you know what he was privy to growing up. Did he speak about it fairly often, or it was something like he just told you the story once and that was kind of the end of it?
No, I mean, we talked about it many times over the time that I knew him. I remember one time him coming into the operating room with he had posted a request for information, like a FOIA request, sort of. And he came with multiple sheets of legal length paper that were just blacked out, just all of it blacked out. And he was infuriated by this. He said, this is what we're getting from our government. So he was as unhappy about the UFO cover-up as the rest of us are.
Sure.
And frustrated by it. But he did the best that he could to inform the world about what happened at Roswell and his role in it. But I think, overall, he found it to be pretty frustrating as well, that we just haven't been told the truth about it. And they didn't back him up, I mean, that's right. What bugs me is this man did so much for the Department of Defense. Really, I mean, when he came back from Iraq, he was in bilateral leg braces from a neuropathy in his legs. And he had a pretty severe case of PTSD. And, I mean, he gave so much for the Department of Defense of the United States. And they just kind of threw him under the bus as far as Roswell was concerned. And I resent it, and I know he resented it. And it's just a shame that the whole subject's been treated the way it has been. But anyway, he would, in answer to your question, he would talk to you about it if asked about it, and he would speak very candidly about it. But he didn't go around, trying to convince everybody to, hey, listen to me. I know the word here. He was
Sure.
A lot more subtle about it than that, and he was a very humble man. So I would just say that he handled it the right way. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the government, in terms of, not only are they mistreating everyone in this subject, but it's like, they're completely mistreating the men and women that have worn the uniform. This, with the Pentagon and the CIA, this is a feature, not a bug. And it's, I've spoken about it many times on this program, how just absolutely astonishing it is that they do this, and they continue to do it. And it's not only with the UAP issue, it's also with anomalous health injury, otherwise known as Havana syndrome, and other areas. And then also, finally, I'd say too, we had Dr. Knuth on here before, and folks watching at home, if you haven't watched that episode, I highly recommend it. This man, this scientist, he puts the whole UAP issue in such quantifiable terms, and in terms of like what the amount of energy would be required to start for one of these things to stop on a dime, all that sort of thing. So anyway, continue. I know we kind of digressed a little bit there, and I think as we go through your slide presentation, I'll pop in with some questions, and then everyone at home at the end of the program, of course, you'll have a opportunity to ask Dr. O'Connor questions that you have. So anyway, please continue, Doctor.
Yeah, I'm just going to digress one more minute
Please.
Here. In that paper, Dr. Knuth, in the accelerations and the decelerations that you mentioned, he came up with the figure that this one UFO that he assumed had a mass and a size of about the same as a F-18 Super Hornet. He came up with a figure of the power output of over 1,000 gigawatts.
Wow.
Now, and he made the point in the paper of saying this exceeds the amount of nuclear power produced in the United States, the entire United States, by more than a factor of 10. Now, if we're struggling with global climate change, And we're looking for a new way to produce power that is non-polluting so that we can get off of this addiction to fossil fuels. It seems to me like we would be very, very smart to start looking at the performance characteristics of these UFOs and seeing, if we can figure out, and I'm quite certain that we can figure it out if the data will be released to the academic world. This kind of power output is just colossal, and we could really use that right now. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say about that. I'm going to talk here about Las Momias de Nazca, or in Spanish, momias is the mummies of Nazca. And, when I first looked at them, like you, Matthew, I saw this thing that looks like plaster, right? And I thought, what the heck?
Right.
And I didn't realize that the reason, I didn't realize that the reason they look like that is because they were encased in diatomaceous earth. And they were done so on purpose to preserve them, because diatomaceous earth is a very good preservative. And so the 3 points that I'd like to get across to people in this talk are that these mummies are real. There's no question that they're real. And I'm going to show some slides later on that I think lend a lot of credence to the idea that it's very probable that these species are tied to the UFO and the abduction phenomena that we've been dealing with. And I think it's also probable that they are connected to the modern day crop circle and cattle mutilation phenomena as well. So those are 3 important points that people need to take away from this discussion. This is a bowl full of diatomaceous earth. Just to show you that it is a white powder, just like we see on the surfaces of the Nazca mummies. It very easily, it's a very friable substance, and it crumbles easily. It's a very strong desiccant. That's why it's primarily made out of silica, and that's why when you get a package from Amazon, you see these little packages of silica to keep the moisture, the humidity down inside the box. That's why they use silica in those little packages, is because it's such a strong desiccant. And because it is such a strong desiccant, it's insecticidal, it's antibacterial, and it's antifungal. And this is the reason that these mummies have been so well preserved for, in some cases, well over, nearly 2,000 years.
Amazing.
So there's a lot of different purposes that we put it to today. On the left in this slide, you can see these are living diatoms and what they look like under the microscope, and they're quite beautiful little creatures. And on the right, this is what they look like when they die under the microscope. They're very complex little shells that we see, sort of reminiscent of seashells, but in a very fine powder. And so that's why these Nazca mummies look so white. So this is the article that you were referring to, published in the Revista de Gestão Social y Ambiental, which is a Brazilian journal. It's I would say it's not a very widely read journal, but nonetheless it is a peer-reviewed journal, and so it was very gratifying to see information about these mummies printed in a peer-reviewed journal. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going through the details of this article. People can look it up and read it for themselves. But, basically what they found was that this one mummy that they call Maria has an elongated skull. And in the CT scans, they don't see any evidence of skull binding, which has been one of the big arguments that we've heard over and over again about why the Paracas skulls must have these elongated skulls. Well, in this particular case, there is no evidence whatsoever. You don't see any rings in the bony calvarium, or the skull. You don't see any evidence of binding. There were no hair on this Nazca mummy they call Maria. No ear auricles. Maria has a cranial volume that's 30% greater than humans. In the paper, they say that she has 4 phalanges in the hands and in the feet. We could call them 4 phalanges and 4 metacarpals and metatarsals, or in my way of looking at them, they have 5 phalanges because they don't seem to have a palm. They're the proximal phalange, or the first one, just seems to come right out of the carpal bones as more like a finger. In other words, the webbing on they don't have the palm. The separation of their digits starts way down here, not up here like in humans. And in the carbon-14 dating of this Nazca mummy, they dated her at around 1771 years ago, which would have been 253 in the Common Era. And so that's very consistent with the numbers that they show for the carbon dating on the Alien Project website.
Now, I do have here, and I think this will reference it. So this is what I think tomography here, correct?
I'm sorry. So yeah, they do talk about the tomography, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But yeah, this Maria was very extensively scanned with CT scans and CT tomograms, and so that they were able to look at the skeleton and the vascular physiology of Maria in quite some detail. And that's why, it's primarily because of the CT scans that we can say that these are real. The CT scans are really what tells the difference, not the carbon dating, not the DNA information, but actually the radiological studies that have been done on these are what inform us that these things are real and have not been artificially assembled.
And in the, I'm not sure if can you see? Let's see here. Can you see the hand there? Not sure if you're getting that on your return. Okay, so
I see it.
Okay, great. So you hear a lot of people say, or the debunkers will say, oh, all of these things were just kind of attached together or glued. But one of the things that I would note is you actually see the joint capsule between the individual bones. So if it were artificially assembled, you would not see a joint capsule, correct?
Yes. You wouldn't. If you look at all of the joints in the hands and the feet and the ankles and the wrists and the spinal columns and the way they articulate and the absolute perfect conformity that you see from one articular surface to the juxtaposed articular surface in the phalanges that, in the hands and in the wrist bones, they're just perfect. And you don't see any fixation,
Right.
So I would like to just, I'll get back to that in a minute.
Sure.
But this man, Leandro Rivera, is what they call a vaquero in Peru, is one of these guys who's made his living grave robbing, which I don't really condone, but in this case I do, because this man, I don't know his level of education or, whatever, but when he came upon these things, he had the good sense to recognize that this was something that was way out of the ordinary, and he had the good judgment to seek out people. In this case, Thierry Jamin, the person who heads up the Incari Institute in Peru, and sought help. So I really would like to commend Leandro Rivera for his good judgment in taking these specimens to some place where he could get some help in sorting this out. Jaime Maussan has been very involved in this, and I hear a lot of people criticize Jaime Maussan for having introduced these Nazca mummies there at the unveiling of them in Mexico City at a conference that was really supposed to have to do more about UFOs. But, in my opinion, Jaime Maussan has been a very important individual over the years in the work that he's done through his channel Tercer Milenio in Mexico to promote people's awareness of what's going on. For example, when I don't remember if you know back in 2011, I believe it was, when that UFO came down over the Temple Mount in Jerusalem.
Oh yeah.
And everybody, as always happens, everybody said, "Oh, it's a fake. Don't pay any attention to this." It's yeah. Right. But Jaime Maussan presented very good evidence that of 4 different films that were made of that event, all from different angles, all from different parties, filming the same thing. So, again, I think it's the forces that be trying to cover up what's happening. But in my opinion, that event was clearly a real event, and probably a very meaningful event. So anyway, this slide that you're seeing here shows, what we do in the operating room. This is when somebody comes up with a fracture or they need an arthrodesis, which is a fusion of their joint because they've got severe rheumatoid arthritis and they need some pain relief from a joint that is still mobile. Then we try to fix those things. And this is what we look for in plain film x-rays of bones that are joined together to create an immobile joint, for example. And here you see what we call a Kirschner wire or a K-wire that's been inserted in the distal end of the finger there to fuse the interphalangeal joint there to immobilize that joint. Over on the right, you see the x-rays of a comminuted fracture of the distal fibula there, and the ankle mortise has been disrupted pretty severely, you can see. And so this is how that injury is fixed. So you see the plate there, and the short screws through the fibula, and the long screw into the tibia to reapproximate the ankle mortise there and to get everything back in alignment. And this will heal up, and it will be a very functional ankle. So these are the kind of things I would be looking for in skeletons that were artificially put together. And so I think are you running the slides there, Matthew?
Well, I'm simply putting up what you have coming out of your desktop there, or your laptop.
So I can go to the next slide then?
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yes, please.
So this is an example of a triple arthrodesis, or a fusion of the long screw here is going down through the talus into the I'll get it in a minute, but and the shorter screws from the navicular into the talus and into the calcaneus. The heel bone is the calcaneus. And you can see that this was done to fuse an ankle that was very painful. You can see all of the sclerotic changes there between the talus and the calcaneus that I'm sure were very painful to walk on. And so the solution to that problem is to fuse that ankle in that way. On the right here, you can see the same thing. This was probably another patient with severe rheumatoid arthritis. A lot of sclerotic changes there in all of the bones of the carpal bones. And so the wrist was fused and a little bit of extension to make it more functional. And these are the kind of things that we would expect to see in a skeleton that's been held together artificially. So computed tomography is a great, unbelievable, really gives us the ability to look into the body in a very detailed way. And when they first started, they were called EMI scans, thanks to the Beatles, believe it or not, because
Wow.
the Beatles' music and the funding that it produced for the company that was recording their music, which was Electric and Music Industries in London, they got so much funding from their recordings of the Beatles that they were able to place that funding into new research by Godfrey Hounsfield and Dr. Alan Cormack, who came up with CT scanning. And the first scan was done at Atkinson Morley Hospital in London in 1971. That was 2 years before I graduated from high school. The first CT scanner was available in 1972. They were awarded the Nobel Prize for Physiology and Medicine in 1979. I graduated from medical school in 1980. And CT scanning has, it's just essential tool in medicine. And in the United States, we're seeing now over 80 million CT scans done in the United States annually. Now, one other thing I'd like for people to understand is when you have metal introduced into a CT scan, you're always going to see a lot of scattering artifact. This is just unavoidable and something remarkably that we do not see in any of the Nazca mummies. The CT scans of these mummies come out crystal clear, very little scattering artifact that we see in those scans. So this is another strong hint to us that these are not put together with any sort of radio opaque metallic, again, screws or Kirschner wires that we see in modern day surgery.
And again, the thing to point out here is in modern day medicine, in order to accomplish any sort of fixation, you have to have some kind of fastener.
Yeah, exactly. Now, somebody could say, well, they're using some sort of non-radio opaque fastener. Well, I haven't ever seen that.
All right.
That doesn't exist. And not only that, but as you mentioned, in some of the scans on the Alien Project website, which I'm showing you a screenshot of their homepage here on the left, and I would recommend that everybody go to the Alien Project website and spend an hour there looking through all of the information that they put up for in the public domain. It's all very interesting and it's very well put together. It's very readable. And these scans that they put up are very useful because not only do you see the integrity of the skeleton structures, but you can trace the vascular structures too across joints. And so, how would that happen if these were artificially put together, where you could see arteries and veins that track all the way up the extremity?
Wow. Okay. So essentially what you're saying is through the CT, you're able to see vasculature that was all preserved and it passing through different bones from one bone to the other through whatever opening would be in that bone.
Yeah. Or, along in the soft tissues, but you can track these vascular structures and nerves even.
Wow.
The spinal cord, for example.
Okay.
You can track that all the way down from the base of the brain down to the end of the spinal column. And there's no interruptions. And, the people that have been researching these things have made it a point to say that they're not finding any interruptions in the integument or the skin of these beings. They don't find any cuts or any suture lines in the skin where they would have been, reapproximated if these things were put together artificially. They're not there. Their whole integument is intact and whole and unviolated. So there's no way that somebody can put something like this together artificially with such detail, unless they are divine. Okay?
Well, and the other thing too, it's not like we're talking about something that because as you mentioned, you carbon dated this stuff. What did you say about 1,500 years ago, or around 200 B AD, or what was it again?
Yeah, around they were around 1,770 years old, plus or minus 30 years, and so that would put them at, let's say 250 AD.
So yeah, so they're
250.
You're right.
Yeah.
So surgical techniques, let alone modern medicine, was, I would imagine, just completely non-existent back then.
Pretty much, they knew how to drill holes in people's skulls. So,
Oh yeah, that's class number one I took in school. Yeah.
Yeah, they knew how to let out the bad spirits that way, but other than that, I don't think that they had a whole lot going for them as far as advanced surgical techniques, at least
Right.
the native people of Nazca. I just want to point out, I think I'm going to skip that one.
Sure.
I do want to say, though, that if you go to the Alien Project website, in addition to the CT scans that you'll see there, you'll find the DNA analyses that have been done on these beings. And this one Maria that I keep talking about, she shares about 30% of her DNA sequences with humans. So that's a very significant number, and something that deserves an explanation. How does this being that is humanoid and yet so different in so many different ways share 30% of our DNA? How did that happen? And so we're going to address that a little bit later on down the line here. But some of the other, this particular one you see on the left here is Josephina, or Josefina, as they would say in Mexico or Peru. And she has these metal implants. Now, this is a plain film X-ray, so you don't see a lot of scattering artifact as you would see in a CT scan. But she's got this metal implant on her anterior chest wall there. And the individual that was involved in removing a piece of this to have it studied and metallurgically analyzed found that this device was actually fused with Josefina's skin and underlying muscle, and was very difficult to lift off of her chest wall without damaging her skin. And keep in mind too that this particular one, I believe she was carbon dated to be around 700 to I think maybe 900 years old. But the interesting thing about this metallic implant is that it was found to have significant content of osmium. And osmium is perhaps the rarest element in Earth's crust. I think it is the rarest element. And it's so rare, in fact, that to get osmium in a significant quantity, let's say enough to amount the size of a sugar cube, that you have to process 10,000 tons of platinum ore in order to get 30 grams of osmium. 10,000 tons of platinum ore is 22 million pounds of platinum ore to get 30 grams of osmium. And yet we see osmium showing up in this metallic implant on Josefina. So,
and was it by a high percentage, or was it something where it was only like 1% of the composition was this element, or was it a larger percentage?
I don't know the answer to that, but on the Alien Project website, they have a statement that was written by the Universidad Nacional San Luis Gonzaga, which is the university in Ica, Peru, where a lot of these experts are centered that have been studying the Nazca mummies now for about, since 2016, let's say. And in this statement that is signed by, I won't go through the names, but there's an anthropologist, 2 radiologists, a hematologist, a pediatrician, a metallurgist, a chemical engineer, a dentist, and a nephrologist, okay? Sorry. I'm just gonna stop that for just a minute.
Yeah, no problem.
I need to go back here. But in this statement from the University of San Luis Gonzaga in Ica, and signed by these experts, they say on a different specimen, this is on a specimen that's called Luisa, which you won't find on the Alien Project website, and I'm not exactly sure why that is, but hopefully that will be forthcoming. But referring to Luisa, and she had a similar implant that they analyzed, they say metallurgical analysis carried out by scanning electron microscopy of a metallic pectoral implant revealed an important finding. It was determined that the implant is composed of an alloy of several metals, with osmium being the predominant element.
Wow.
Okay, so we have apparently 2 specimens, both having osmium as a significant portion. And, even on Josefina, if it's 1% osmium, I don't really care, because 1% of whatever the weight of that object is still going to be a significant amount of osmium if you have to process 22 million pounds of ore to get it. And could they have done that or even known about osmium 900 years ago? I seriously doubt it.
What and then I guess the other question would be as well, like when you look at, and punch it up here, when you look at this this sort of barbell shaped thing, what was it removed from the body for analysis, or was just a shaving of the material taken off?
A small wedge of it was removed.
Okay.
Yeah, from the periphery, from the left side periphery of it, a small wedge of it was removed using dental instruments actually to cut through it. And when they were trying to lift off that little wedge, they discovered that it was actually intercalated or fused into the underlying skin and deeper muscle tissue. So this is a technology that we don't even have today. And then, how to do that.
Of course. And again, it's like way back then, I don't know how you would make a material like that. I'm curious as well. So the bottom part that would, let's say, fuse to the bone, was it a smooth planar surface, or was the bottom of it variable as it would sort of meld in with the material below?
Yeah, it was variable. I don't think that they could actually separate it.
Wow.
I mean, I'm sure that it could be, scraped off with some sort of an instrument, but when it was lifted off, the skin and the underlying muscle came with it.
And with this as well, with this plate, when they would run it through a CT, there was no signal scattering in the radiograph, right? Like it was again, you didn't have.
I didn't see any.
Wow. Amazing.
I didn't see any.
And has there been any sort of theory as to what perhaps the purpose of this thing was? It doesn't seem like it was an ornamental thing.
There have been some theories put forward, but was it there to repair an injury? Somebody has commented that they thought that Josefina sustained an injury of, you see the bone there above that looks like our clavicles, but is actually more like an avian, what would be called a furcula, which is seen in birds. Okay. it's, in other words, there's no sternum there, and there's no articulations between a sternum. It's all one bone that goes across there. And one of the radiologists commented that it looked as though you can see up there on the upper left that there may have been a fracture, and that this device may have been there to stabilize a fracture of the furcula. So that's probably the best theory that I've seen about why this was applied. Down in the pelvis, you can see the three objects there that are radio opaque, and when they drill down into those, they realize that these were eggs. They're hollow inside. And so we see here a humanoid reptile in front of us, with characteristics of a human, but also, the furcula, instead of clavicles, there doesn't seem to be any in the shoulder joints. There's no real articulation between a ball, the humeral head, and the glenoid fossa, which in humans, that's what forms the shoulder. And then you see down below, there's no real acetabulum in the joint between the femur and the pelvis, as we would see in a human. So the human-like, but definitely not human. There in the forearm, there's no ulna, that you only see the radius, or what in humans would be called the radius, but you don't see two bones there, just one. And then, of course, you see the tridactyl, or the three fingers. The ribs are much more horizontal in Josephina than they would be seen in a human, much more reptile-like. And so, this is a humanoid reptile.
Was there a method of determining what the exterior of the egg was made out of? Was it like a shell that you would see with like any sort of aviary, from a bird, or was that analyzed at all?
My knowledge, the material of the eggs inside Josephina was never analyzed, but they just were testing to see if they were hollow. And so they did sort of like a laparoscopic procedure, where they just went down through with a needle and down through the egg under fluoroscopy. And sorry, I'm going to start that over in a second, but they were doing this under fluoroscopy so that they could, in real time, they could watch the progress of the needle go through her skin, down through the surface, to the surface of the egg, through it, and then the surgeon could feel the pop as the needle went through the surface of the egg and into a hollow cavity.
So like in a plain film X-ray, if you were to put an egg there, would it be radio opaque?
Yes, definitely.
It would be. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this isn't unusual with an egg, essentially.
No, that's exactly what we would expect to see.
Okay.
Is what's seen on that film. This is a different specimen that you can find on the Alien Project website. This one's called Montserrat, and her fetus, little Raphael. And so here we're seeing a video of the CAT scan, the first CAT scan that was done on Montserrat. And if you look down in Montserrat's pelvis, you can see this little fetus. And somebody who wants to claim that this is all is obliged to explain how someone would introduce a fetus so perfectly into a 900-year-old specimen. And I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's really ludicrous. Yeah. So let me play this and just watch carefully, and you'll see the fetal parts in the pelvis here.
Todos esos verdes que
todos
se
esos
ven,
verdes son
metálicos.
Un cuerpo extraño. Oye, sí parece que hubieran restos de hay huesitos pequeñitos, mira. Hay huesitos pequeñitos como si estuviera embarazada.
en el abdomen.
Sí, mira, ahí están.
Fragmentos de hueso.
Sí, pequeños.
Ya, eso le tiene que estudiar
Como un feto pequeño.
Ya, fragmentos de
Tiene
hueso.
unos huesitos, miren.
Sí.
No puede ser.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
you know, on the right here, you can see a frame capture of the fetus and the three digits there in the developing fetus. So very amazing work that these researchers have done to capture all of this data for us and let us know so publicly, you know, what they've been doing and what's been going on. They've been, you know, nothing about this has been secretive or under the table.
So anyone, if you have the right credentials, right scientific credentials, medical credentials, you can go and view the raw data.
Yes. Well, you don't even need any credentials to go on the Alien Project website and see all of the CT data that they've posted. Now, I have in the past requested to get the DICOM. So DICOM is digital medical communication format that is securely transmits digital radiological studies online. And so far, I have not been sent those, but I would like to get my hands on them. I did spend about 2 hours with a friend of mine who's a board-certified radiologist here in my home. He came over, and I said, I would like for you to come over and look at these scans with me and see what you think. And he was willing to do that, and he sat with me here for close to 2 hours looking at the different scans available on the Alien Project website. And he said, you know, I agree. I don't see any evidence that these things were tampered with. They look absolutely organic and natural. Of course, your tendency is to want to compare all of the anatomy to human anatomy, but that we're so familiar with. And much of it is like human anatomy, but much of it is also quite different. Here, you know, in the ankle, sorry, I don't know why this thing keeps skipping ahead. Maybe this is on a timer. But anyway, in the ankle you can see the tridactyl digits in the foot, and you can see the bones of the ankle.
I think you might need to back it up. Looks like I think it jumped ahead one. There we go. Okay, now you're there.
Okay, so you can see the bones of the ankle here, which do kind of correspond to the bones of a human, but there's a missing cuneiform bone there. You know, we normally have 3 cuneiform bones, and here we just see 2. You do see the navicular there, number 4, labeled number 4. That would be our analog of our navicular bone, and then the number 1 is the cuboid bone there in the forefoot.
But again, like when I look at this thing, the picture on the right, like it. I mean, I don't know what the medical term would be, but it looks harmonious. It looks designed, like the relation between the different bones. It doesn't look like one was just slapped on top of another from a different part of the body. It all has a contextuality to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so you see,
mm-hmm.
You can see over here on the left, which would be sort of on our lateral ankle, the lateral malleolus of our ankle. Everything is just juxtaposed there perfectly. You would think, you know, if somebody was going to stick a foot on a leg, that's where it would happen.
Right.
And yet you see this vascular structure in the upper left part of the image there. You see this vascular structure tracking up across the ankle joint, mm-hmm. Very smoothly. You know, no interruptions there at all. So
amazing.
Yeah, and thank you for pointing that out, Matthew, because you're right. You know, if you look at the one there, the cuboid labeled number 1, and then you look at the bone upstream of that one, those two joint surfaces are just contoured perfectly together, you know?
Yes. So if these were assembled, if you wouldn't have that that kind of match in between the socket and the ball, or I don't know what you would call it, but it wouldn't match like this. And the other thing you notice too, it's like where the joint capsules would be, they all seem to be sort of a somewhat same, a distance, or the gap seems consistent across, just sort of pointing even further that these things are matched. They're not just thrown together from different parts of different animals.
Exactly. I mean, because this specimen that we're looking at here is 1,700 years old, of course, it's going to have an appearance that's way different than we see in a living person. We wouldn't be seeing these wide gaps between the bones, but fortunately, the wide gaps allow us to see so clearly how perfectly these surfaces conform to the one above. So yeah, there's no possible way, and you can see when you look at the number 2 and number 4. The joint capsule there is intact. You don't see any interruption in that.
Whereas it's gone in 1.
Yeah, in 1 you don't see it as clearly. These cuts are sometimes not exactly where you wish they were. Right. In order, the CT cuts, in order to see the detail you want to see, and that's the advantage of looking at the DICOM images, is that you can stop those exactly where you want to look, and see the detail you want to see. My radiologist friend did find that a little bit frustrating given the technology that he's used to working with. But, nonetheless, he also concurred that these things are not artificially put together.
So even like today, like let's just say, with your obvious knowledge of anatomy, if you had an anthropologist with you or something, and you wanted to take, say, a human foot or a human hand and remove the other digits, so that it only had 3 digits, would that even be possible to produce something like this? The previous image, but would it be even possible with today's technology, to even kind of mimic something like that and have the sort of quality of how everything appears joined?
I don't think so, because you would see a step there. You would see the bone proximal to let's say you took a finger off, you would see the metacarpal head above it, where it was supposed to be, where it was supposed to articulate. And you don't see that in any of these scans. You don't see any evidence that anything was removed. If that responds, if that's an answer, I don't know.
Right.
But.
Well, and again, going back to what you originally stated as well, there was no interruption in the skin indicating some kind of open incision to put these things in or manipulate the bones within the body. There's no sign of that in any of the soft tissue.
According to the researchers, they, obviously anybody that was looking this and trying to figure it out would look for that very carefully. Right. That'd be one of the first things that you'd look for is, am I seeing any evidence of any interruptions in the skin here where something could have been added on and then sutured together or glued together or whatever? And they don't find that. They haven't found that in any of these specimens. So in my view, that itself rules out the possibility that these were put together artificially.
And as well, you were noting that that a lot of the vasculature is intact. So if you've got an artery or vein going from one bone to the other, how would you do that? And especially back then, it makes no sense. Yeah, these debunkers do not know what the hell they're talking about. Anyway, all right. Sorry, no, I'm sort of going off into left field here, but continue.
No problem. No, these are all good questions. So this is a geoglyph that's found in the northern Atacama Desert in Chile. And you can see here that these people who made these geoglyphs, which would also include the Nazca lines, that apparently they revered these beings because they created this image of them. And this is just shown in blue and in red to make it clearer, but this is what the original image looks like, with the three fingers above and the right angle that we see here of the toes of the foot. Very clearly, this is referencing these very same beings in a giant geoglyph that was created, I'm assuming, because they held these beings in high esteem. So this is a detailed image. I don't know. Are you see? What are you seeing there on your?
Yeah. So I see.
Are you seeing?
Okay. Now I see the fingerprint. Oh, sorry. It's bouncing around a bit.
There we go.
Okay.
So on the image above here on the left, you can see that they have an analog to our Achilles tendon, but our Achilles tendon inserts on our calcaneus down lower than that, you know. This Achilles tendon appears to insert on what in us would be called the talus, or the bone that directly articulates in the with the tibia and the fibula there in the ankle. So this is different about them. Their Achilles tendon, which they have to flex their ankle joint, it inserts a little bit above where ours does. The shape of their calcaneus is much more attenuated than ours, which is our calcaneus is a much more robust bone than theirs. but and you can see that this right angle that we saw in the geoglyph, and it was accentuated in the geoglyph. You see it perfectly here in this lateral X-ray or this lateral CT image of the foot of Maria. And you see this curling under, or actually a right angle turn of the distal phalanx. And then you see what they call cojinetes, which are like pads, semicircular pads on the very end of these digits. And in the next slide, we can see that the ends of those digits have fingerprints, what we would call fingerprints or toe prints, except theirs are much more transverse in configuration than a human fingerprint, which we see on the right. Theirs don't circle around. They seem to just arc very gently across the surface of the distal end of the digit. So a U.S. team composed of Dr. John McDowell, who's a forensic odontologist from Denver. He taught forensic odontology at the University of Colorado, and Dr. William Rodriguez and Dr. James Caruso. The three of them went down to Peru, to Ica, to take a look at these specimens. And my hat's off to them for having the open minds and the courage to go down there at their own expense and really closely inspect these specimens. And when Dr. McDowell came back from Peru, I quote him here as saying, "This is a very important investigation worthy of further study." So these men are experts in what they do. They went down there, they saw up close, and they came back with the impression that these things are real and that they deserve much further study.
Can you back up to the foot, the foot again, and the ankle?
Yeah.
So
back up further than that.
Yeah, no, that one right there. So on the one from the mummy, there's no bony protuberance at the proximal end, versus like on a human foot. So would that indicate like a difference in the gait of the being, or how it would walk?
Yes, I think it definitely. I would think that these would walk upright,
Okay.
And most of the opinions that I've read from different individuals that have looked at these things in detail have come to the conclusion that they did walk upright on their feet. Their digits are so long that it seems to me that it would have been fairly awkward, but I don't know. But yeah, I think that they would have walked upright.
Got
it. So, I want to just point out here, we've all heard David Grush's testimony under oath to Congress back now it's about 1 year ago exactly, where he said that the U.S. Department of Defense had recovered alien UFOs and he called them biologics. And so, we have to wonder, given what we saw in the movie E.T. with Steven Spielberg's characterization of an extraterrestrial and how similar they look to the humanoid reptile species that we see in the Nazca Mummies. I mean, there's just remarkable similarity there. And we have to wonder, where did Steven Spielberg get his information?
Yeah.
And were these mummies actually known of before this film E.T. was discovered? I question that, and I ask that on. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with Chase Brandon. He was a CIA he was in the clandestine service of the CIA, and he was stationed, interestingly enough, in South America. And he wrote a book called The Cryptos Conundrum. And after his assignment in South America, he was actually assigned to be the CIA sort of emissary to Hollywood. And the CIA, they have people that work in Hollywood to make sure, I think that, I'm sure they perform multiple roles in their liaison between the CIA and Hollywood. But this Chase Brandon, interestingly, he served both roles. He served the CIA down in South America, and then he served also in Hollywood as their liaison. And so I wonder if any information came from South America to the ears and eyes of Steven Spielberg through one of these liaisons with the CIA.
Well,
it's just a question.
Well, and another question too, maybe if you could just kind of tilt your camera down a little bit. Even if they didn't see any of this from Peru, let's make the argument that these species are perhaps some of the same species that our Pentagon and CIA have recovered. So if it would certainly stand to reason. I mean, all of us, I think, have been pretty confident that Steven Spielberg had really good inside knowledge. These don't seem like things that he would just guess on out of the blue. If he did, he should win. He would probably win the lottery, although he probably has enough more money than the California lottery right now. So
unless he's an incredible remote viewer,
Well, yeah.
I mean, he would have to be an incredible remote viewer.
So interesting here on my signal, Dr. Garry Nolan just pinged, and he says, Matt, this presentation is amazing. Again, this is Dr. Garry Nolan of Stanford University, the executive director of the Soul Foundation, and he was. And he says, I don't want to come on. I was going to ask him if he wants to come on the air, but he says he looks like shit today. So he's just going to text these questions. But
so do I.
Well, you should see me without a suit. I totally look horrible. So anyway, so Dr. Nolan says, Matt, this presentation is amazing. Clearly, he's very impressed. He was noting here that there seem to be two different types. He notes here the small one seemed very different than the other one that is crouched over. Are these two species?
In fact, they've described three, as far as I know, three different separate species of these mummies that were all discovered in this same repository of these body or corpses. Really, is what they are. They're not really mummies, they're corpses,
Right.
because they have all of their internal organs that are highly desiccated and fairly difficult to figure out what you're looking at. But as far as their interior organ structures, but they have discovered three different species that I'm aware of. All of them are quite different than one another. So,
Dr. Nolan was noting that the brain cases are very different between the two. So is it when he says that the brain cases are different, is the internal volume of the brain casing different in size, or is it more of just the shape of it? And would that indicate a difference in age of the different ones? So
I don't know if you're referencing these two that are juxtaposed here in the slide on the left, or if he's talking about comparing like Josefina here in the foreground on the left to Maria, who's a much different, humanoid specimen. The sizes of these are way different. These little smaller ones are about 60 centimeters long. And the Maria, I think, was like 1.68 meters long. So she's about the size of an average human female. Okay. These are very small. These are, let's say, 2 feet long, So yeah, they're way, way different.
Dr. Nolan was asking, he noted earlier, just kind of going back to his message here, he was saying that he says they seem to be two different types. The small ones seem very different than the one that is crouched over. So I think perhaps he's talking about the one that was that was going through the CT scan.
Oh.
And also a note from Dr. Nolan as well, is it possible these beings came from a different caste system per se?
It's absolutely possible.
Sure.
I have no idea what their hierarchy of, this is going to be something that anthropologists and sociologists, this one reason that the journal that picked this article up is because that's the kind of things that this particular journal that's produced in Brazil, these are the kind of questions that they address in their journal, is the sort of social and environmental consequences of discoveries like this and what they could mean. And so I think that that's the reason that this particular journal picked up this article and peer reviewed it and published it.
And going back and looking at the image on the left, so I think this would be the beings that you say sort of had more of reptilian sort of features. I mean, you look at the parallelism between the individual ribs. I mean, that definitely is not something human, I would say.
Right. Yeah. No. I mean, it's humanoid, but definitely not human. The one on the left or in the foreground is the one that had the eggs that you could see in the pelvis. And in reptiles is a more parallel sort of relationship between the ribs. Is that more of a common feature in reptiles, that sort of parallelism? I don't know the answer to that, actually. I'm more familiar with human anatomy, but
clearly this is
biologist
not...
Doctor.
Go ahead. Sorry,
Dr. Jose. There's a Dr. Jose de los Rios Lopez is one of the primary biologists that's been involved in the study of these. He's in Campeche, Mexico, I believe, and so he would probably be able to address that question, but I don't know.
Got it.
Anyway,
okay.
I better move on here.
Yeah, please.
These cultural references to three-fingered beings are found all over the world. These are some of the pictures that Dr. Jose sent to me of different textiles that he's come upon pictures of them in different museums and stuff that all feature these three-fingered, three-toed beings as if they were revered in their culture. This piece of pottery that you see on the left here is dated around 1300 to 200 AC. Antes de Cristo is, so this, for us, it would be like BC. And so you can see there clearly three fingers referenced in that pottery, and also these sort of eyes that are a little bit wide-spaced and slanted a bit. And over here on the right, you see a petroglyph that occurred, apparently, according to what I've heard, this petroglyph is very near to where the Nazca mummies were actually discovered. And you can see that it clearly references three fingers on it. I made a trip to New Zealand it's been 3 or 4 years ago, and I saw these three-fingered beings, these carvings of these three-fingered beings all over New Zealand, all carved by wood carvers of the Maori people there in New Zealand, the native people, the indigenous tribes, and they highly revere these three-fingered beings as being, one of the gods that, I'm not sure they worship them, but they certainly do respect and revere them. This picture on the left is one that I took at a native trading post in Maine in the United States, showing the three fingers and the three toes of this being that a Navajo native person commented to me looked very much like their depiction of the ant, what they call the ant people. And then over here, there's actually on the right, you see a picture of this three-toed, three-fingered being. And there's actually a canyon in Utah that's called Three Fingers Canyon. And by the way, this patch, which is from the 509th group, or 509th, what is it called, battalion, or whatever they call the 509th. It was referred to as the 509th bomb group. That was the group that dropped the nuclear weapons on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And it has this three-fingered being clearly depicted there, holding on to the stealth bomber with this very low sigma or a low radar signature. And this is apparently a real patch that was produced for the 509th group. And this motto down at the bottom says, Gustatas similis pulis, which means tastes like chicken. And I have no idea what that means. Like, if it's supposed to be funny, I don't think it's very funny. I find it really kind of offensive, really. But anyway,
I thought it translated into debunkers can eat it, but maybe I was wrong. So, anyway,
I like your interpretation better. But anyway, you can find this printed in the debrief printed an article on this of different patches that were kind of interesting patches that have been produced for our U.S. military. Well, this is one of them, and it's got three fingers, and it has an alien that looks just like an alien. So, yeah. This meme of aliens is insinuating itself into our reality all over the world. Here we see on the left, this is the new patch that the Roswell Police Department uses now, with this UFO sort of there front and center and in the center of the R. And they protect and serve those that land here. I love their motto. Way to go, Roswell Police Department. And then over here on the right is just a picture of a big tea jar that I took in Cologne, Germany. So, people all over the world are picking up on this. The word is spreading that all of this is real. And so, definitely there needs to be more research done on the Nazca mummies. I think we do need more DNA studies. done to sort of nail down what their DNA sequences are and maybe do a little bit more refined research so we can get out, some of the bacteria and some of the fungal contaminants that have sort of interfered a little bit with interpreting what we're looking at here with the DNA studies. So many different fields of study can get involved in this with anthropology, archaeology, sociology, cultural sociologists could get involved in this very deeply. What I can tell you about these burials in diatomaceous earth is that this was not a common method of burying people in Peru. So this is very unusual. I doubt very much that the Nazca culture knew for themselves that diatomaceous earth is such a strong desiccant with these antibacterial, antifungal, and insecticidal properties. And so that begs the question of who knew that, who directed this type of a burial, and why. Inside this area, this cave where these things were discovered, were also some severed hands and heads of these beings. So if these are the NHI that we're dealing with here today, this seems like pretty rough treatment of their own people to be introducing severed hands and severed heads that were equally and similarly preserved in this diatomaceous earth. So to me, that sort of speaks for these being genetically engineered beings that are not the actual NHI, but rather were probably emissaries or genetically engineered creatures done by the NHI.
And you were noting as well that in this particular burial site, many of these corpses, and again, as you pointed out, they're not mummies. It's not like in Egypt where these things were covered in some kind of chemically treated cloth to preserve them. These are preserved by this powderous substance that they were buried in. But you were noting as well that these corpses all have been dated to different not time periods, but one might be 1500, another by 2000 or whatnot. So it's not like some crazy hoaxer went and just dumped a bunch of stuff in there and put them together. There's just absolutely no way this could have a prosaic explanation.
No, one of the hands was actually dated 6,000 years old.
Wow.
So they extend anywhere from 6,000 years old all the way up to, let's say, sometime around our 500 AD, which would put them in the same so they extended over a fairly long period of time, and even up into the period that we associate with the construction of places like Sacsayhuaman in Peru, Machu Picchu in Peru, the Coricancha in Cusco, Ollantaytambo, which is another unbelievable, it's where we see these stones that you just cannot even imagine how humans could have done it, and so that begs the question of whether the NHI, and when I say NHI, I'm saying non-human intelligence that is here and that we're dealing with, whether they had some hand in building these unbelievable structures,
right?
Or at least their technology may have been involved in building these. I'd like to know, like you mentioned, Matt, what is the percentage of osmium in Josefina's and Luisa's metal implants? How many grams of osmium are there in these implants? Because if it's over 30 grams, then there's no way the Nazca culture, the people in the Nazca culture did this, because they're not coming up with 30 grams of osmium when you've got to process 22 million pounds of platinum ore in order to get 30 grams of osmium.
It'll be interesting
now,
too.
This is something.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say it'd be interesting too. Like if there was some sort of hypothesis that were developed as to what the if there's any sort of reason behind the mechanical, metallurgical reasoning behind like what those, what the percentage of metals that made up this thing, like if you were to analyze and go, oh, maybe they did it because of this. I'd be curious if there any sort of function could be sort of construed from looking at the very specific makeup of the metals.
Yeah, this might even require some input from electrical engineers to take a look at this. What we do know about them also, I forgot to mention, is that they're hollow.
Wow.
Okay, so
okay.
they were apparently cast.
You're kidding
before
me.
Before they were placed on these beings and actually integrated with the skin and the muscle tissue below. So, yeah, they're an enigma and something that, and again, the research that can be done on these can probably go on for several more years before people have all this figured out. And I wouldn't say that I'm not qualified really to do that kind of genetic research, or I'm not a radiologist, but I've looked at enough CAT scans and enough X-rays over the course of my career to know that these things are organic and they're real, and they deserve a lot more study by people probably that are smarter than I am. But anyway,
but I mean,
moving on here, I just want.
Yeah, one last point.
Yeah.
I just, the thing I would point out is because these plates, which I wasn't aware of, are hollow, that indicates to me that these were not some naturally occurring thing. They had to have been machined or produced. And again, thousands of years ago for something like that. I mean, if that's not proof, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I agree. This would have been, for Josefina, that would have been 900 years ago. But still, it just doesn't sound like it was within the capability of these people to secure a lot of osmium and make something like that.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. Continue. Sorry for interrupting.
So this film, I saw this maybe, I don't know how long ago. It's been a while ago. Certainly long before I ever became aware of these Nazca Mummies. This showed up on YouTube, and I thought it was quite remarkable. And it was picked up for very briefly, but of course it was called a hoax, as everything is, by the mainstream media. But this video was allegedly made in the Amur region of Russia, and somebody on YouTube that commented on my video said that they thought that one of the individuals that we hear commenting in this video says something about that his dog found this specimen. I wonder if the dog didn't mangle the specimen, but you'll see in the video that it's quite mangled, but not so badly that we can't see some remarkable similarities. So let me play this.
Вот его там нашли, короче, смотри. Пойдем. Где нашли? Вон, видишь. Сейчас все проходим, смотри. Вон она, сука, безобразие лежит. Сейчас, погоди, погоди.
Wow.
So, I don't know. Sorry,
Stunning.
It kind of cut off the end of that.
Go ahead and restart it.
Let me go back here because it's important for people to see this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Сказал хули, ебаный, бро. Собака хули унюхала, сука. И все, мы хули думаем, что за нахуй лежит? Смотри, да я хуй знать, погоди, смотри. Вообще, ебать его копать, что за нахуй-то это? Ну, да понятно, что дохлый его. Да хлеб, короче, лежит.
Но она не наша планета.
Полнейшая дохлеть.
На Курчкане.
Ноги хули нету, ебаный, видишь, нахуй. Вообще какая-то ебать тень. Непонятная.
С неделю лежит, наверное, тут.
Но...
Это не больше.
So, that video is quite remarkable. It certainly looks very real to me.
Absolutely.
And when we look at this Nazca mummy that we see on the right, and then this is just a frame taken from that video on the left. The similarity that we see between these beings is just remarkable. I would say, the one on the left, the one on the right, the Nazca mummy on the right is probably at least 900 years old. So we're looking at a very desiccated specimen, whereas the one on the left, of course, died within, I would assume, hours of when this video was made. And, I don't know what happened, whether the dog found this being and just bit off pieces of it, or whether it was involved in some kind of a traumatic event. I don't know. But anyway, you can see with your own eyes there the close similarity between these two beings. So this would lead us to think that they were here 900 years ago, and they're still here. They're still here with us, clearly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we hear a lot of discussion or see a lot of people commenting. I think people that have a very strong religious faith about whether these might be demons or whether they might be angels. And, I think what we see here is flesh and blood. There's no doubt about that. And so like humans, they die. And so I don't know whether that's evidence that they're not demons or angels, but to me, I think it sort of is. These are biological beings, and so they were here for a few thousand years, but then they disappeared. But apparently one showed up here to be filmed. Their evolutionary predecessors have not been discovered in Earth's fossil record, to my knowledge. And therefore, it strongly appears that they did not naturally evolve on the Earth. So that, begs the question, well, how did they get here? Where did they come from? If we don't find any other remnants anywhere else on Earth of their skeletal remains, then how did they get here? So they either came here from another planet at least 1,750 years ago, or they were genetically engineered by some other species of beings that were here on Earth, that I'm going to refer to as a non-human intelligence. And they're clearly products of some sort of genetic hybridization with human DNA, that Maria shares about 30% of her DNA with humans. Josefina shares about 19% of her DNA with humans. And some of their anatomical features imply a similarity to certain theropods, which were dinosaurs back in the Triassic era. And for me, this raises the question of whether we ourselves, Homo sapiens, may also be a product of genetic engineering that occurred perhaps back as far back as 350,000 years ago. And when we read those words in the Bible that says, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, that's always been a curious way of phrasing this in my mind. And this sort of goes in the direction of maybe saying that that maybe we too are genetic hybrids that were created by some other race of non-human intelligence that got here a long, long time ago. And I was raised Catholic. I'm getting into a little bit of musing here as far as beliefs go, and I don't really like to go there too much. But one thing that I've always wondered about with the Catholic Church is this concept of original sin. Where did that concept come from? And if we are genetically engineered beings and we did not naturally evolve on planet Earth the way many, many other species did. Is that, in fact, what our original sin is that we sort of skipped many, many, many thousands of years of evolution, and, boom, we just came into being 350,000 years ago. That suggests to me that perhaps that's what's referred to in the Catholic Church as our original sin. And so clearly, if that is the case, then we still carry these wild type genes that are expressed in ways through the our greed, our warlike tendencies, and some of these negative traits that we have to use our intellects to get beyond, and it's very necessary that we do that. So anyway, I'm not going to dwell on that for a lot, but I do think that a lot of this is going to challenge some of the foundational belief systems, especially of the Abrahamic religions. And I don't necessarily think that it's going to annul them. I think it's just going to flesh some of them out and force us to see them from a different perspective.
Yeah, that completely makes sense.
Yeah, we're going to have to see them from a different perspective. And, if we were genetically engineered, we shouldn't be surprised by that, because we're doing the same thing. This was an article that showed up in the New York Times maybe a month ago. Should we change species to save them? We now have the capability of doing that, and we're not that far along in our ability to genetically engineer things, but we're already considering altering species to make them more fit to survive in a world of global climate change. So if we're doing it, or we're thinking about doing it, or we're talking about doing it, we shouldn't doubt that some other species that had the technology to get here would have done this already a long time ago.
That armor, I kind of like to think of myself having a big thing of armor to deflect all the debunkers that keep coming after me. So
if you're going to be in this game, you've got to have a pretty thick skin, I'll tell you.
I do. They debunkers can kiss my what. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
So whoever created, if these were genetically engineered, which I don't think there's any question they were, then whoever did that are masters, or were, and probably still are, masters in genetic engineering. They've been aware of humans on Earth for at least 1,750 years. And so given this expanse of time, I feel quite comfortable with the notion that they're not here to harm us. They're not here to conquer us. I think what they're here for is to school us and to kind of steward us along as we stumble through this, very awkwardly, I might add, our learning process of how to become. How do we become real enlightened stewards of, first of all, this planet, and then maybe go out into the universe at some far future date and do what they've been doing. And that is help spreading life through the universe and shepherding that life in ways to continue the chain of life throughout the universe. I think that's our ultimate destiny if we can get beyond our penchant for killing each other and producing increasingly destructive weapons. I think we may have a shot at becoming expert genetic engineers ourselves and helping spread through life throughout the universe in this way. I think we're quite capable of it if we can get a handle on our appetites for destruction. And that's what I'd like to see happen. So I don't think they're here to harm us. This little artifact here was allegedly discovered in the same cave that the Nazca Mummies came from. And when I look at it, I go, well, that's not an ashtray. What is that? It looks kind of like a UFO. And when the hands of Thierry Jamin, the man behind the Inkari Institute, turned this artifact over, we see these three little nubs on the bottom of it. And when I look at that, I go, wow, that looks so much like the description that Bob Lazar gave us of the UFO that he worked on at Area 51 with the three, you can see on the screenshot there on the left, the three little objects that he called gravity directional. I think he described those as gravity. They direct the gravity the power that comes out of the gravity amplifiers that he described is guided by these three objects on the bottom that he shows there in cross section. And then we see over here on the right one of George Adamski's photographs of an alien UFO that he photographed, and it shows these three little bottom appendages that look and remind me very much of the artifact that Thierry Jamin is displaying here in what I think probably is a vehicle of transport used by these beings, and was put in stone, basically, and buried with them in the Nazca Mummy cave. I'd like to play for everybody. This is a film that I did with a lady named Carol who lives nearby here. She came to the Jesse Marcel Library and told our group about her experience, and I asked her if she'd be willing to let us film her story, and she agreed to do that. And so I hope this audio will come through for everybody, but let me just play what she says here.
My husband and I were in bed. I don't know what time of night it was, but we were sound asleep. I was sound asleep. And I woke up. I don't know what woke me up, but I looked at the window, and there was something outside the window. It was bright and illuminated, and the curtains were drawn. However, the inside of the curtain was flipped up, as like it was levitating from outside. And this being had its finger pointed in the window at the curtain or at me. I'm not sure. It was flesh colored, I would say, light colored, illuminated, as I said, and it had what we know now to be a common depiction of an extraterrestrial, with the big eyes and the oval face, more big at the top, smaller at the bottom. And the one thing that was really prominent to me was the finger was elongated and real bony-like. And well, I was paralyzed, absolutely paralyzed.
So thank you, Carol. If you see this video, I am grateful to people like you who are willing to, step out of the herd and tell your story and be courageous about it, because it's an unusual story, but I don't know where you could ever find a description of that Carol gives there of the fingers that we see in the Nazca Mummies. They're just her description is so poignant, so apropos of what we see in the CT scans of these beings from the Nazca Cave.
And I'd point out as well, as I mentioned earlier, because of the Zoom connection, you're kind of out in the country there. I know the audio from that cut out quite a bit. But again in the YouTube description, we have the page to Dr. O'Connor's video, which of course is this presentation, and you can skim through it and then and obviously hear the audio quite a bit better from the lady there. So anyway, please.
Yeah. So in that audio, she just describes, and you could see her use she said the finger was long, and by long, I mean, she's like, it was really long, and it was long and bony. Okay. So, and I talked to Carol, what you see in the film here is just a short segment of the discussion that I had with her here, but there's no doubt this happened to her. I have zero question that this happened. And again, I think it's so great when people are willing to come forward and talk about what happened to them in a very honest and sincere fashion, like Carol did.
It takes courage.
So
I mean, that's serious
thanks to
courage.
everybody. Yeah,
it truly does.
It does. So there's an example of the long and real bony like description that Carol gives in her description. What more could you say about that? It's long and it's bony. So I think that the UFOs seem to be ramping up the pressure on our government, on our military to disclose. And I think there's no question that they're associated with the UFOs in our skies, with human abductions and with crop circles, and possibly with cattle mutilations as well. I say that because these cattle mutilations, there's no way that these are being done by humans. I've looked at one personally myself up north of Choteau, Montana. I saw it. It was a full-grown Angus bull, and I guarantee you, when you walk up to one of these things, within 30 seconds what you're looking at. It's no problem to see exactly what you're looking at and what it is, what it represents. What you see in front of you is absurdly violent. And by absurdly violent, I mean, there's no reason for it. It's violence that is perpetrated on these animals that is just absolutely arbitrary and needless, and therefore I call it absurd. And my belief is that these things, people have speculated, well, why are they doing these things? What sort of scientific studies are they doing, or do they need the blood to grow human fetuses and all this stuff? I think what you're looking at is exactly what you would see if they were human heads on pikes, which is thankfully not what we're seeing. We're seeing this done to animals. And I think these are nothing other than a wake-up call and a warning to the human race that don't get violent with us. Because if you do, this is what you're going to see. Only it's not going to be cows. And, the fact that they can do these things in a matter of what we can surmise to be a very short period of time with extreme efficiency, we should be paying attention to these things, and we should be taking them very seriously, because these things are super violent, and they're just warnings as far as I can tell. So take it seriously, my fellow citizens, and let's not give them a reason to ever start doing these kind of things to humans. So that's all I really want to say about cattle mutilations, but I can tell you that, one other thing I'd like to say is, this has been going on now for 40 years. There's been tens of thousands of these things. And the reason that we haven't been able to figure out what they are, people know what they are. When a veterinarian walks up to one of these things, I guarantee you, they say, what in the hell is this? And they have no clue other than it could be humans, but probably not. And they're not allowed to say, because of the UFO cover-up, they've not been allowed to say what's really on their mind is that it's aliens, okay? But I guarantee you, a large number of these veterinarians, when they walk up to these things and they're asked to make a diagnosis, they go like, this is so weird.
Yeah.
But they can't say aliens, because the UFO cover-up has prevented them from going there to risk their reputation as the only veterinarian within miles and miles. And so they've not been willing to do it. But they need to start doing it. That's all I can say.
Of course.
Why do I say that they're related to crop circles? Well, look at Sebastian here on the right and look at the phenotype, or the more, what we see in his face, and then look at the crabwood crop circle of August 2002. Now, these could almost be identical twins. The shape of the head, the shape of the eyes, of the orbit, the eye sockets. And look at down below on the crabwood crop circle, you can see there are 3 fingers holding that disc. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
That's really important. Okay. And then you can see up here these 3 things to the left of the chin that, if you look at them in detail, they look like little UFOs. They're in the shape of little UFOs.
Wow.
Okay. Now, this Nazca mummy looks almost, to my eyes, looks almost exactly like what showed up in this crabwood crop circle of 2002. And the message in this disc, a lot of people probably know this, but if you don't, this is binary code in the disc. And I know that because I spent about 6 hours decoding this with ones and zeros, like Paul Vigay did, the computer programmer who originally, I don't take credit for figuring this out, by the way, Paul Vigay, who ended up dead, washed up on a beach in the UK at a very early age with young children. And he was the one that originally decoded this message. But he was right. I'm just going to say that. His interpretation was right, except for one small detail at the very end that doesn't matter anyway. So the message says, beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception. Conduit closing. Okay, that's the whole message there embedded in that.
Wow.
Now, if you want more detail on this, go to YouTube and Google and look up David Flynn, who interestingly is also from Helena, Montana, where I am, and look at his analysis of the crabwood crop circle and its relationship to what happened at Roswell. You will be amazed at what David Flynn came up with. And I don't have time in this, which is already lengthy thing, to go into the details of it. But crabwood is definitely related to what happened at Roswell. That's all I'm going to say about that. Look it up for yourselves. David Flynn, the crabwood crop circle and its relationship with Roswell on YouTube. If you can find it, email me and I'll send you a link. So the thing in that message that haunts me is that where he says, still time. Okay, well, what does that mean? Still time for what? That implies that there's a time limit imposed on what we're doing here. And we need to think about that. And we need to start becoming proper stewards of this earth and of each other. So this is just an example to show everybody, don't go to Snopes for the truth. Snopes or any other group that wants to control what you think, what you think is true and what you think is false. When you go there and you say, did researchers find a mummified 3-fingered alien in Nazca, Peru? You'll get an answer that says, a corpse found in Nazca, Peru is that of an alien, and it'll say false, okay? And it'll tell you, in the narrative, it'll say, but we are willing to say with certainty that it will not succeed where others have failed and present definitive, scientifically verifiable proof of alien life. Okay, well, I say if these corpses are not signs of alien life, then what would be? And I would just ask our government and the other governments, Peru, the Ministry of Culture in Peru, if you're not going to help us by disclosing, just stop working against us, okay?
Yes, absolutely.
We can do the work. We have a lot of experts, a lot of smart people that are going to figure this out if you won't tell us. But it would be really nice if you would tell us so that we can just not waste a lot of time and resources. But no matter, just if you're not going to tell us the truth, just quit working against us.
Agreed.
It's really just so aggravating and so unnecessary. So my theory is that these Nazca mummies were buried as a time capsule for us to discover at this time in our technological development, when we have the ability to analyze and sequence DNA, when we have the ability to peer inside with CT scans. Before people would have discovered these things, they would have gone, I don't know. But now we really have the ability to delve deep and to learn a lot, and we will learn a lot from these Nazca mummies. And so I'm grateful that these things were set into this diatomaceous earth and put there for us to learn and to foil the UFO cover-up. These are going to foil the UFO cover-up because they can't be covered up. They're already out there. They're already in the public domain. The tissues are already distributed around the world for DNA studies and other studies to be done. So, the cat is already out of the bag, thanks to people like Dr. Nolan and other courageous individuals who have been willing to come forward and talk about this in an open way. And I'm grateful. So I would say that right now, these are the most valuable paradigm-changing historical artifacts on this planet. And I've created a GoFundMe to try to raise $50,000 to contribute to whatever the University of San Luis Gonzaga there in Ica, Peru, needs to spend it on to research these mummies and move all of this forward. And I think it would be really cool if the National Science Foundation contributed to this. We've sent $12.5 billion to Israel for this war that they're engaged in. And if we would have sent 10% of that amount to the University of San Luis Gonzaga in Israel, in Peru, in Ica, Peru, and said, build a state-of-the-art scientific research center specifically intended to research these mummies and invite the best and the brightest from around the world in many different disciplines to come there and do this research, that we would be able to get this done in a very short period of time. So to Peru, to the Ministry of Culture, please don't stand in the way of this research. Get behind it. Invite qualified scientists there. This is going to go a long way toward our understanding of not only the NHI or the extraterrestrial beings or whatever they are, whoever they are, that are here and we're dealing with. It's going to help us understand not only that, it's going to help us understand where our religions came from. It's going to help us have the discussion, the much needed discussion right now about nuclear weapons on our planet and why we should get rid of them. These beings have been turning them off repeatedly for 40, 50 years. There needs to be a worldwide discussion about why they've been doing this. What do they know that we don't know? And one other thing, if you can see, there's a book here that I wrote. It's called UFOs, Nuclear Weapons, and a New Age of Reason. And I would ask you to buy the book, not really because it's a great book, but it's got an analysis of 5 crop circles in there, including the crabwood crop circle, that I think are accurate. And I think what they prove to me is that these beings know what's going to happen in the future. And I think that some of the crop circles prove that they know what's going to happen in the future. And this goes along with Dr. Michael Masters' theory of extraterrestrials. Now I'm not saying that they're humans from the future, but what I am saying is they can move into the future. They can manipulate time in some way. And I think that has something to do with how we see their craft move from, over here to over here and
Sure.
in microseconds. And so these crop circles, to me, they offer really solid proof that that these beings know what's going to happen in the future. And if that's true, then they're shutting off our nuclear weapons for a reason. And we better start getting damn serious about finding out why and having the discussion of why we need to get these things off of our planet, like right away, stat. There's going to be an accident, I'm afraid, and it's not going to be pretty when it happens. So anyway, this slide is just thanking various people. Leandro Rivera Hois Mantilla, who stood in the way of the Peruvian Ministry of Culture when they tried to confiscate these things. Jaime Maussan, who spent $1 million on this so far. Dr. Jose de la Cruz Rios Lopez, who got me interested in this because of his expertise as a biologist. Dr. Jose Salce Benitez, who has been one of the key figures in researching these and who actually was fired from his job as a forensic pathologist in Mexico, because of his interest in this. The nearly 1,000 people in France who contributed to the research to get what's been already done through another crowdfunding effort. And so that's my license plate.
I love it.
And just a reminder to everybody, we just got here. Our species has existed about 0.00112% of the age of the universe and about 0.0035% of the age of our galaxy. We just got here. We don't know what the hell is going on, and we're trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure it out.
Vic West hasn't figured it out, though. It's all seagulls and balloons. So anyway.
Yeah. So as the crop circle said, there is good out there. We just have to look for it. We have to embrace it, and we have to do our part to learn about it.
Agreed.
So thank you very much. I'm sorry this went on for so long.
No. I can sit and look at the sort of live audience as far as like if people are tuning out or whatnot, and it has just been constant. Everybody has been wildly engaged and interested with this presentation because, and obviously Dr. Garry Nolan that's in Stanford has been watching this, and and he mentioned he is just absolutely blown away by this. One of the things that when I was originally told about this was from the executive director of the UAP Disclosure Fund, Yuan Feng, and he messaged me one night and he's like, "Man, you gotta check this out." And again, I had always been of the mind this looked like a bunch of BS, and I saw the whole cake video and all of that. So I just figured there's nothing to it. And then when Yuan's like, "Matt, you got to go check this out," and I watched the entirety of this presentation, I immediately said, I've got to find this doctor and get him on the show. I mean, when you look at the totality of all of this scientific evidence that you have presented, how can you not? I mean, it's a game changer. How can this be anything but that? it blows me away, and I don't know if it's just a trait with these bananas debunkers, or maybe it's just a thing in human nature where they don't want to face this, so they immediately go for the simplest answer and say this. Oh, it's got to be fake, or it's got to be a piece of vanilla and chocolate cake. It astounds me when you look at all of this and the detail of your presentation, how this can be anything but something that is non-human. It absolutely. This is the best evidence I've ever seen, hands down.
It's that's what's great about it, is it's hard evidence. It's the kind of hard evidence that the debunkers have been asking for, and it's right there and it's out in the public domain, and now it's spreading around the world, and it's not going to be able to be shut down like they've been able to confiscate other evidence in the past. So, and I understand why people are afraid of it, and it challenges some people's religious beliefs and stuff like that. I get that, but what people really should be scared of is what's going on this planet that's being done by humans. We have a lot more to be afraid about with all of the, we've got 17,000 nuclear weapons on this planet pointed in every direction. And people always think, well, it's going to come from nobody's going to pull the trigger. Yeah. But, what if there's a glitch? What if there's some kind of an electrical storm that triggers? What if there's just some kind of a computer glitch or a bad chip or whatever, we don't know. You can't. Entropy is an uncontrollable force in the universe, and we cannot predict what's going to happen. And my guess is that it just as well might come from just some stupid accident that blows this planet apart with our ridiculous nuclear weapons. So I support the campaign for the international campaign for the abolishment of nuclear weapons. I encourage everybody to go there to their website. They were instrumental in getting the treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons passed by the United Nations. And we should all be supporting that with everything we've got. We got to get rid of these things.
Absolutely. We are.
One other thing,
please.
Can I just mention temporary temples in the UK are, Steve and Karen Alexander are the people. They're kind of like the last ones left standing. There's been a lot of other people like Lucy Pringle and Andres Mueller and a lot of other people that have been paying attention to the crop circles over the years and photographing them. But now we're kind of relying on Steve and Karen Alexander to get up in the air and photograph these things every summer, because a certain percentage of these, and I don't think it's very many, I bet it's probably less than 20 out of 7,000 that have been sent here by extraterrestrials, but there's definitely been some that have come here from the non-human intelligence being sent to us. And those are the ones we need to be paying attention to. And Steve and Karen Alexander are catching those with their photography from the air. And, they're really stressing how to carry on the work they do. Every time Steve goes up in the air to get pictures, good quality photographs of these things that we really need to document them, it's $500, for him to do it. And he needs our support. So please, if you have any spare change, send it the way of Steve and Karen Alexander at Temporary Temples in the UK. They have a great website and they need our help. So please look at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the nuclear weapons issue, and I could not agree more. We are in an incredibly bad way. This trajectory that the world is on, both geopolitically, environmentally, but it's not common knowledge. But there is serious discussion going on back during, I think it was the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty. I think SALT I, our land-based strategic nuclear platform, the Minuteman III missile. It's called the Minuteman III because it's capable of carrying 3 multiple independently retargetable reentry vehicles, or 3 warheads. So back in, I think it was SALT I, they demerved them. And so currently our Minuteman nuclear tipped ICBMs have a single warhead, and that's it. And the idea being is that demerving it, they thought, would decrease the chances of a first strike by Russia. Well, now there is serious consideration, and I believe it will happen, that they are actually going to remerve the entire Minuteman III fleet. So it will go back from it'll go from a single warhead, and they'll take the W-77 and 78 warheads out of storage, and they'll put them back on these Minuteman missiles. So we are going in the opposite direction of what we should be doing, and actually, this coming this coming Sunday, I've got I pre-taped a show with this gentleman by the name of David Dorr. He is a world-renowned financial analyst who owns a trading company, and he brought up this slide that you will see a week from today that demonstrates it in just black and white terms, the sheer amount of gross domestic product that is spent on our nuclear weapons infrastructure. It is absolutely frightening. It's a travesty. Beyond all proportions, what this military industrial complex that we all have unfortunately been bought into is doing, and it's a lot of this whole military industrial complex that continues to retaliate against whistleblowers, continues to hide this from all of us, and this is not what democracy is supposed to be about at all. So I know we're running a little bit long, but I know everyone is really enjoying this. If you have the time, I would love to give some of the read some of the audience questions.
Sure. Yeah.
How are you doing? Okay, great. Let's see. I'm going to read something here, going through some of Dr. Garry Nolan's Garry Nolan's notes, and Dr. Nolan notes, I would like to contact Dr. O'Connor at some point with his permission. So Dr. Garry Nolan would like to get in touch with you, and if that's okay, I'll connect you with him once we're done with the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And he notes, he said, by the way, I know some of the world's best geneticists who can deal with the DNA that you guys are dealing with. Another point that he noted when you were talking about the hollow, the sort of shelling of the implants or whatever you want to call them in the beings, Dr. Nolan noted that this simple idea for hollow is that it enables strength. It's standard technique. Evolution found it many times. Hollow bones, lightweight, and internally structurally stronger. And that is certainly the case. Dr. Nolan was blown away by the video. Yeah. He just said, "Wow, the video," and he noted as well, which is alignment with what you mentioned earlier. Dr. Nolan notes the kind of genetic engineering required is absolutely stunning. It would require AI-level abilities to do what he's saying. I'm not disagreeing with him at all. It just implies capabilities that are well beyond ours. So this out there is, so his theory is definitely well within reason. So yeah, I mean, it's, again, you look at what you presented and all of this evidence, the fact that it is available for anybody to go and look at this raw data. These are clearly not hoaxes. It absolutely clearly is not a hoax. Okay, let's get to some of the audience questions. Firstly, folks, if you're enjoying the show, we would absolutely appreciate it if you would hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment. All of those sorts of things are signals YouTube looks at for deciding whether they want to promote this show organically to other people that are not viewing it. And also, we've received a lot of super chats and people that are joining Patreon. Again, we appreciate that. Your donation is what, and support or continued support is what allows me to be able to bring you this show. And we try to do it every week. Okay, so let's see here. Lisa Bolden, thank you so much for the super chat. Very much appreciate that. This question from Mike Jameson. Have you read the Cypress Tech CT scan of Josephina? Have you read the Cypress CT scan? I'm not sure what that means. Does that ring a bell at all?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't.
Okay. Stephanie Carrillo. Oops, sorry, wrong button there. Stephanie Carrillo. Do we know if the species
Oh,
is
wait
from...
a minute. I think
Sorry, go ahead.
maybe he might have been referring to some. There were some CT scans that were up on YouTube, and I think I think that was probably what he's referring to. And yes, I have looked at those. I sure have, and they just serve to reinforce exactly what we see on the Alien Project website. But yeah, those are all DICOM transmitted CT images. Yeah.
Okay, Stephanie Carrillo. Do we know if this species is from the Hominoidea superfamily, hominid or hominin? Clearly, I didn't pay attention in college. Otherwise, I'd be able to pronounce this stuff.
Can you just say again?
Sure. Do we know if this species is from the hominid oidea? So it's like hominid plus O plus idea, hominidea superfamily, or hominid or hominin?
Yes, I would not say that it's within the hominin, but I would say that definitely hominid, and certainly the DNA sequencing that was done shows that 30% of Maria's DNA sequences conform with human DNA sequences that's been fully sequenced. By the way, I thought it was kind of amazing. I was looking up what does it cost right now to do a complete DNA sequence on one human genome, and the cost of it has actually dropped to less than $1,000.
Wow!
Which I thought was kind of amazing. It was, when they first started doing it, it was $1 million or something like that to sequence one human genome, and now it's less than $1,000. So, with $50,000, we could sequence the DNA on, maybe 50 of these beings that are being discovered.
So I have a question for you. So you mentioned that in some of the corpses, the DNA, I think you said, the human DNA contained in one of them, I think you said was around 30% or something like that. The remaining 70% that doesn't match anything. And again, I'm not a biologist or anything like that. You always hear about like DNA degrading or things like that. Could there have been a degradation in that DNA that would account for the 70% that doesn't seem to match anything we know?
No, I don't think it's degradation so much as it is, just like right now, I think the biome project that's trying to sequence every species on the planet has done maybe like 1 million species, and they call it a moonshot for biology because it's just a huge undertaking to try to sequence all the DNA sequences of every living organism on Earth. So, but there's a lot of contaminants. These things have been sitting in a very dusty, dirty environment for quite some time, and the longer they sit outside of this diatomaceous earth environment that they were in, probably the more contaminated they're going to become with fungi and bacteria and what have you. So that's one thing that concerns me a lot, is getting this research done in a timely manner, because these are organic specimens, and every day that goes by, they're deteriorating a little bit more and a little bit more. So this needs to be carried out in an efficient way. So, yeah.
I seem to recall reading, I believe it might have been on that webpage, that the government of Peru has tried to repossess these specimens. Is that still an issue or a concern?
It was an issue up until about a month ago. Now, I don't know what's happened since then, but I know that they've tried at least twice to confiscate these mummies from the people that are holding them. And both times that they have had courageous individuals that have stood in the way and said, no, you're not taking these. So we can all be grateful that there are people down there that are protecting these, like almost with their lives.
Yeah. Well, if tell your friends down in Peru, if somebody comes knocking on the door and they say that they're from the CIA Office of Global Access, don't open the door. Those guys are up to no good. I can tell you that. Okay, great.
Right.
And by the way, just to point out the level of interest in this. So we have been on the air 2 hours, 21 minutes, and the viewership just keeps growing and growing and growing. We're like well over 1,000 live viewers. So that is just a testament to your presentation and the information that you're sharing today. So,
well, I appreciate everybody that's willing to hang in there and that's been willing to watch this, because it's important information, and we need to get it spread around the world as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. Okay, Saxmo asks this question: how many different specimens have come forward ranging between genuine specimens, human remains, and fabrications? Or has it all been this?
No, I think, I can't say that specifically, but I have heard reports that there are people down in Peru that are creating dolls, I would call them dolls, that are mimicking these things and trying to sell them for money. And, that shouldn't be surprising. Peru is a poor country. The people there, they do what they have to get by. And
of course,
I would expect something like that to happen. But, the specimens that we're interested in are the ones that there have basically been about 10 now, or 11 that have been studied in detail through the Garry Institute, working in concert with the University San Luis Gonzaga there in Ica, Peru. And those are the ones that I'm paying attention to. And, the dolls, let me put it this way, I wouldn't go buy one, you're probably going to get ripped off.
Yeah.
But,
probably so. Okay, this gentleman asks another really great question. Has there been any efforts to track down the grave robber and where he got these specimens in order to retrieve more if he happens to have them, and evaluate the locations where they were found?
Yes, there have been. And as far as I know, he has not yet revealed on the website. I will say that it says he has not yet revealed to Thierry Jamin, the leader of the Garry Institute, exactly where this cave is. And to be honest with you, I hope that he doesn't, until the Ministry of Culture of Peru comes on board, agrees that these are important, agrees that this is a critical part of the cultural heritage of Peru, and agrees to guard this area with armed guards, because there's going to be, if the word gets out about where these are, people are just going to be going there, flocking there, trying to remove them and steal them and move them to other locations. So, I hope that the location remains secret until the government of Peru comes on board and says, we're going to do what it takes to preserve this invaluable evidence that has to be studied.
Yeah, absolutely. Broke Johnny Live, thank you so much for the super chat. Yeah, we're just in the past 30 seconds to a minute with 30 more viewers. So somebody's squawking about this thing right now. That's for sure. Okay, Lakes Girl. Okay, my question is, the man who's speaking on the data, did he directly interact with these mummies, or is he just reading information published? I guess this person is asking, have you seen them yourself, or you're just analyzing the data?
Right. Yeah, I have not seen them myself. I do, and interestingly, my wife, her whole family is from Peru, and she was born here in the United States, but both of her parents were born in Peru. And I've been to Peru, and I know Peru, but I've not been one of the primary researchers involved. I came upon this actually through Facebook, through a relationship that, because I speak Spanish, I get Facebook posts from people that are Spanish-speaking people, and one of them happened to bring up something about the Nazca Mummies, and I was reading it in Spanish, and I saw this Dr. PhD biologist from Peru, and so I started from Mexico, and so I started communicating with him about what his involvement was in the research of these mummies. And that's kind of how I became interested and involved in it. But I have not been one of the primary researchers involved in studying the mummies, and I have not seen them myself in person.
Got it. Okay. Chris, thank you very much for the super chat. Tony D asks, question, do you think that they are tribal/nomadic or civilization with a consciousness or more like animal-typed existence? Did they have clothes? That's a good question. Was there any clothing found at these sites at all?
Not that I'm aware of, no. No clothing.
And any thoughts on the tribal nomadic versus civilization? Just not enough data.
No, I mean, to my knowledge, there's maybe less than or equal to 150 of these specimens that exist in Peru. So I rather doubt, given that all of the evidence we see in textiles and pottery that sort of commemorates these beings in the designs, I would guess that they were sort of taken care of by the people. But, I'm not a cultural anthropologist, but that would be my guess, is that they were revered and they were unique in their appearance and their function in Peru at that time. And so I sort of doubt that they were nomadic.
The current publication that was just released by the library, is this a peer-reviewed document?
By the library?
I think, is that where it came from?
You mean by this journal?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so yes, it is.
It is peer-reviewed.
This is the paper. I did underline one paragraph here that I think is pretty poignant to this. They say, finally, the research seeks to contribute in a scientific way to solving the enigmas that still surround this strange bioarchaeological find, unique in the world, and that could mean not only a change of scientific paradigm, but of a historical, social, and cultural nature that could consequently revolutionize human consciousness, as well as the perception of the world and life as it is established until now. So that paragraph kind of gives you an idea of the gravity that the researchers see in this. And yeah, this is a peer-reviewed journal out of Brazil.
I think Ben was asking about that. And yeah, so there you go. It's peer-reviewed. Question answered. Have there been any attempts, this is from Saxmo, have there been any attempts to try and match anomalies found in these structures to our fossil records? Let's see, try and match anomalies. I get maybe what the question is, some of the, let's say like radiological findings in these, there really isn't. There's some that matches ours, but some do not, some elements of it, as we were talking about earlier, if I'm understanding that correctly. So there are some commonalities, but also not.
Yeah, I have not seen any, there have been a number of anthropologists that have been involved in this, and I have not seen any mention from them that anything like this that they're aware of that's shown up in the fossil record, or since, so essentially we have these 150 beings in this cave, and they seem to be the only ones that people have discovered. Now, whether, it just seems unlikely that you would have like a human, some sort of a genetic abnormality or a chromosomal mutation that would show up as tridactyly in the hands and feet of a group of 150 humans and then suddenly disappears from our, in our genome, in the human genome. So, that doesn't appear to me to be an explanation for why something like this tridactyly that we see in these things, in these specimens, suddenly appears and then suddenly disappears. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me that would be any kind of a genetic malformation.
Saxmo asks, he has some really great questions here. Has the Catholic Church expressed interest in the Nazca mummies?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay. Let's see, just flipping through some more questions here. This is from Dave R. How do we get CBS's 60 Minutes to cover this? They absolutely should. I think I'm going to message Graham Messick on Signal and give him a heads up. He should watch this thing. I suspect he would be very, very interested in this. Cosmic Road, where are the giants? Maybe we'll come across those in some kind of desiccant preserved. That would be great.
Perhaps.
Millisecond Falcon, he said that there's going to be meaning a doctor, that there's going to be an accident. Please ask for clarification. I think we were talking about more in terms of nuclear war, correct?
Right. Yeah, that's what we were talking about. And, I certainly don't think that's going to be at the hands of the non-human intelligence. I just think, the probability, stuff happens and you hang on to these kind of weapons with this kind of destructive power long enough, assuming that it's always going to be under control. One day it may not be. I've had some real disasters happen in my life, and I know disasters happen that that just come at you out of the blue. You don't see it coming, never thought it would happen. And I've had things like that happen in my life. And I'm sure everybody else has had tragedies in their lives that they never saw coming. So why do we assume that keeping these deadly, awful things on our planet is going to be safe indefinitely? It's not.
Yeah, no, it's not. And the thing too is that these weapons, they are machines. Machines break. Machines fail. And then you put on top of that the whole element of human control of them and interjecting that sort of randomness. It's just a recipe for disaster. So doctor, what is next for you with this project? What are the next steps, and how can folks support your work?
So I would like to get down to Peru here pretty soon and see about if there is any way I can get involved in doing some of this research. But certainly just to see the mummies, I would love to just see them, in person. As someone mentioned, the fact that I haven't seen them, maybe that takes a little bit of wind out of my sails, but I do fully intend to do that. I really think, though, that what I would like to see people do is to go to this GoFundMe site that I started a couple of weeks ago. I promise you that every single dime that people donate to that fund, I will make certain that it gets to the people it needs to get to fund, more research into this and get to as much detail as we can about who these beings were, how they came to be, what happened to them, and see what else we can learn about them. They're going to be key to our understanding of our place in the world, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Dr. O'Connor, this has just been fantastic. I have not seen this level of engagement from our audience on a show like this before. And I could tell this morning when I was looking at the number of people waiting for the show to air that this would really be, I think, pretty groundbreaking news. And what I love about your presentation is you're able to take these medical and scientific concepts and discoveries and evidence with this whole mummy thing. I keep saying mummy, but these bodies, and break it down in a way that all of us can understand and illustrate the importance of the evidence and illustrate the importance of these discoveries and yeah, I'm so glad you did this. Speaking for myself, I'm so glad that these things are not pieces of vanilla and chocolate cake, that they are actually real. And I honestly cannot understand why this isn't on 60 Minutes or some kind of breaking news. The mainstream media, as we've spoken about time and time again, they're asleep at the wheel. But anyway, we will be sure to post the links that you referenced to earlier in terms of the GoFundMe and all of that. And
if you can find the link to temporary temples, please put that on. They really need our support.
Great. Yeah, we'll do. Yeah, do me a favor, send me those links or email them to me, and I'll be sure to put them in. Doctor, you've been on here for a very long time. I imagine you're probably used to that from being in the OR for hours on end, monitoring people's anesthesia. Oh, I had a quick question for you. I had read somewhere that some doctors theorize that when patients are put under deep anesthesia, that their consciousness may actually locate somewhere else, move to somewhere else. Have you ever had thoughts about that?
I have, and my thoughts on it are that I think that our conscious, my conception is that when we give people anesthesia, we're just sort of interfering with the function of their antenna, which is their brain. But I kind of think that a lot of the talk about consciousness that we hear these days, that much of it resides external to ourselves, and that our brains function as a sort of a very complex antenna to bring in those signals and process them and create our reality in that way. So I sort of don't think that we lose or that our consciousness leaves our bodies. I think anesthesia just interrupts our ability to perceive what's always out there,
Understood.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Doctor, thank you so much for your time. Very much appreciate your hard work on this, and we look forward to having you back on to hear about what your latest, your next findings are.
Okay. Thank you so much for letting me be here with you, Matthew.
It is
truly,
it is truly an honor. All right, Dr. O'Connor, Dr. Richard O'Connor, ladies and gentlemen, thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Wow. That was, that was something else. A few things kind of come to me on this. The amount of evidence that is being presented here is substantial. It's black and white. You can tell that these aren't things that really are up for much interpretation when you look at it. I mean, certainly some of the details are, but when you back up and you look at just the totality of the evidence, I mean, it is clear they are not hoaxes. It is clear they are not fabricated. The plain film X-rays that he displayed, it is crystal clear these things are not assembled. There's nothing used to provide any sort of fixation between the bones. There are no fasteners in there. The other thing that I thought was really interesting too, and this is what really caught my eye when I began reading about this, was the fact that these metal plates, which appear to be machined, again, as Dr. Garry Nolan, who was watching the show, pointed out, they are hollow inside, and you hollow out things for lighter weight and also increased strength. So here you have these plates that are made up of what is osmium, I think, which I think he said was either 22,000 pounds or 22 tons of, I think it was platinum ore, had to be processed in order to, get like a gram of this stuff. So here you have these implants, if you want to call them that have this incredibly rare element in them. Another thing, as I mentioned, they're hollowed out in the middle, so it's not like they were just chiseled out of something. They were clearly cast. The other thing, which I think is really the most important element to this, is these implants, they adhered or seemed to grow into the soft tissue, the muscle, and the bone. And as Dr. O'Connor pointed out, we do not have that technology that will do that at all. So let alone talking 1,500 years ago, I mean, come on. There is just no way. And, I rag on the debunkers a lot. It's not the skeptics. The skeptics are the folks that are asking honest questions. There was a guy here, Ben, who I think is probably a skeptic and saying, well, this stuff needs to be peer researched. And he's absolutely right. And the doctor pointed out that indeed, this is a peer researched paper. But a sort of common element of these debunkers, I like to call them debunkers, is they know that people that are watching or either reading things or watching the news, they know that it's really kind of human nature to just grab onto the low-hanging fruit. You've got this volume of information that is kind of a sort of fire hose of stuff that we all have to drink from. So the debunkers know that if they can put just something very simple out, a one or two sentence line. We've pointed out with the guerrilla skeptics, this debunking propaganda group that is run or at least somewhat funded by the Center for Inquiry, which is a multi-million-dollar professional debunking propaganda wing, of which Mick West, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye the Science Guy, Susan Gerbic, who runs the Guerrilla Skeptics, these are all on their board of fellows. These are not unbiased people. They are biased, and their job is to put out this sort of biased propaganda. That's what debunkers do. So, as I pointed out in I'll see if I can bring up the slide earlier, but let's see here. I don't have it, but anyway, actually I do have it here. So the articles that came out following this that just right out the gate say they're fabricated, they're man-made or whatever. This is how the debunker mentality works. You take what is essentially a super simple explanation and then you just say, this is what it is. You don't provide anything to back it up. And unfortunately, people go, oh yeah, that sounds right. This stuff must be fake. 99.9% of the population today, they do not read. They listen to what they're told. They listen, doesn't matter if you're left, right, center, or whatever. Almost all of us listen to news that is strictly in our echo chamber. People don't do the research. And I think that's what's great about Dr. O'Connor and others that are doing really great research on this, that just lays it front and center that the professional debunkers, the folks that seemingly do this for a living, they don't know what they're talking about. They're so disconnected from reality. They do not listen to science and reason. They rely, these debunkers, McWest and these folks, they rely on this kind of magical thinking, as I like to call it. For instance, McWest was on this Twitter Spaces with on the Enigma thing with I'm blanking on the guy's name from Enigma, and I think McWest's sort of latest theory about the Tic Tac stuff was that it was a balloon launched from a submarine. And so again, it's these oversimplifications that these debunkers rely on to spread this garbage that they do, trying to convince all of you that there is nothing to see here, that it is all made up, that pilots that we invest tens of millions of dollars in, our military pilots, are just imagining this stuff. It's truly maddening. But this is how these folks operate. Dr. O'Connor pointed out that if you go on to Snopes and you ask the question, are these mummies or whatever they're referred to, are they real? And of course it says no. Well, that's exactly the same amount of BS that you get on Wikipedia. So Wikipedia, as we pointed out, I think in an episode we did back in January, this gentleman by the name of Rob Heatherly has uncovered literally mountains, thousands and thousands of pages of evidence that demonstrate that these debunkers, these modern day propagandists, are going in and manipulating Wikipedia not to add a balanced point of view, but to change these pages, these Wikipedia pages, where they are nothing short of flat-out propaganda. You ask yourself why these guerrilla skeptics, who are sponsored by the Center for Inquiry, why they would go and create the Wikipedia page from scratch of former director of ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, the former director of that, Lou Elizondo, why they would create his page from scratch. And again, these are this group of debunkers that are writing for Wikipedia. And I think Susan Gerbic pointed out she's got something close to 200 of these Wikipedia editors. So you go and you ask yourself, well, why are these folks creating Lou Elizondo's page from scratch on a subject that they're not even interested in, not interested in, but they don't believe in? It's so that they can own these pages, they can manipulate them, and that they can spread their propaganda. That is all these folks are. When you see Neil deGrasse Tyson go on CNN and start, making jokes about UAPs and why are these cell phone videos fuzzy and all of that, you're listening to a man that has probably not done a peer researched paper in God knows how long, certainly is not doing the work. He is, again, one of these kinds of just mouthpieces. Neil deGrasse Tyson is nothing better than a science entertainer. He's not doing the work. He has absolutely zero scientific curiosity. And these debunkers are no better. They do not have the curiosity. They are not open to things. They start from a preconceived conclusion that all of this is a bunch of bunk. There was at one point that I heard Mick West say to Mark von Rennenkamp, he just kind of blurted out, "Well, you think all of these are space aliens?" In other words, what you're thinking is just absolute is bananas thinking. But that is the oversimplification that these debunkers use. Even if you look at Occam's razor, which I'm not entirely familiar with, I have to admit, but how I understand it is Occam's razor says that it's the simplest explanation is usually the explanation. It's not the complicated explanations. Well, here you have a case presented by Dr. Richard O'Connor, of a medical doctor, of these scientific findings in a peer-reviewed paper. And when you look at it and you apply Occam's razor to it, this is pretty damn simple. I don't know how you can conclude anything else. And as Dr. O'Connor stated, they are having to be super careful with these corpses to make sure they don't fall into the wrong hands or they get confiscated. We certainly know the CIA and the Office of Global Access would be happy to do that. We know that they have been up to all kinds of illegal activities that are many of which are certainly felonies. But yeah, if you look at Occam's razor, when it applies to this particular thing, clearly there needs to be continued research on this. I think there will be more and more answers. But when you just look at this from a simple point of view, it is black and white that this is absolute evidence, I would say. And the other thing that I would point out as well is this is not a group that will say has one of these things stuffed away in a refrigerator that other scientists cannot view. It's not like you have a team of just a couple of scientists that are holding the materials that are only publishing the results of the test data. They're only reporting the conclusions. This thing is wide open. They are providing the raw data. They are providing access to anyone that wants to come and look at it. I would imagine if you're looking at it in person or want to examine the bodies in person, you need to be somebody qualified to do that. But I mean, that just speaks volumes as to the fact that they are approaching this from a level of scientific curiosity and a place of openness where no one can say, you know what, you guys kind of hit all the test data, only a few people were privy to it. No, they're opening all of this up. So that just goes to tell you right there that these folks are operating from a place of scientific integrity, of scientific curiosity, and two of things that certainly are lacking with scientist Neil deGrasse Tyson and certainly Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick of Arrow, who I have no idea how the hell he why he's even a scientist. So, speaking of which, while we're still here, and we'll go maybe to the top of the hour, I wanted to bring up a article from Chris Sharp. I'm a big fan of Chris Sharp at Liberation Times. He does amazing work. If any of you are not following what Christopher Sharp is doing on the Liberation Times regarding this topic, you are absolutely missing out. In this article that you must check out, lack of transparency surrounding U.S. government's former UAP office director raises questions, and it certainly does. And U.S. Department of State cannot explain why the former director of its UAP office he cannot explain why the former director of its UAP office's prior involvement with UAP was not disclosed to the media and public at the time of his appointment or tenure. It goes on to say here, DOD spokesman, who I'm sure was Susan Goff, or Go, however you say your name. Dr. Kirkpatrick had no involvement with Skinwalker Ranch. He attended one meeting on it on the Hill in 2018, which he has publicly acknowledged. He publicly acknowledged it later. Liberation Times asked DOD why Kirkpatrick's attendance was never previously made public, and they respond, "We cannot comment on interviews, blah, 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 blah." Yeah. I have continually stated that the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, certainly under Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, is nothing short of the Pentagon's in-house bullshit factory. They are there to lie to Congress. They are there to mislead Congress. They are there to tell all of us that it's nothing but balloons, seagulls, and Hollywood lighting balloons. That is their purpose. And I can tell you in my conversations with one former Navy officer, high-ranking Navy officer, who had an extended meeting with Aero, with their sitting director, Tim Phillips, that this individual was astounded. This person indicated that it was an entire disinformation operation that Aero was trying to run on this high-ranking Navy officer, essentially trying to convince him that the Tic Tac was blue tech. So if you have any questions as to whether you can trust Aero, whether you can trust the interim director, Tim Phillips, who I believe was brought on by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, I mean, the proof is in the pudding right there. When I go through this article a little bit more, the situation is, Chris Sharp notes in this article, the situation is problematic for the DoD, as Aero's creation was supposed to begin a new chapter of transparency regarding the UAP topic within the U.S. government. It's unclear whether the blame lies with DoD for failing to disclose Kirkpatrick's involvement with the meeting, or with Kirkpatrick himself, who may not have been informed of DoD before taking the role. DoD briefing card regarding establishment of Aero stated the department is committed to transparency with the Congress and the American people while balancing its obligation to protect classified information. I mean, just give me a break. That is just absolutely, they are not here to tell you the truth. They are here to do the bidding of the people up the chain of command. We know that Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick was put in there by Big Daddy Ronald Moultrie, who was the director of the Office of Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, that same office that engaged in retaliation against whistleblower Lou Elizondo and others. So here again, you have Aero, which is not doing its damn job, that is wasting taxpayer money, giving the middle finger to Congress, all the while laughing behind Congress's back. I know that if I were a member of Congress, I would be absolutely enraged that they are doing this. One source indicated to me that Aero has continued to provide nothing but prosaic cases to Congress. They're sitting on a mountain of data of non-prosaic stuff. I mentioned earlier that there is a Tic Tac case that Arrow has in their possession that is reams and reams of intelligence data that they are not sharing with Congress. This is how they roll. And I would just venture to guess. I have no idea what Tim Phillips is like. I've never met the man. I know in my conversations with various people regarding Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick before it was ever public that he was going to lead this thing, everybody that I spoke to when I got wind that he was going to be the guy, absolutely no one had one single thing good to say about Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. Absolutely none. And that just goes to show you what people think about the gentleman and how much they trusted, they trust him. As I've said time and again, Arrow is nothing but a flypaper operation. The intent was trying to attract whistleblowers, most likely to just send up the command to the CIA, to the other stakeholders in this, exactly what whistleblowers were saying. They were up to no good. And I certainly hope that either Congress is going to hold their feet to the fire or something is going to happen. And what I would say to Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is, if you're going to put the Arrow director, Tim Phillips, in front of your committee, I would highly suggest you put him under oath, because you can't trust a damn thing these people tell you. That is for sure. And it is high time that all of us as Americans contact our representatives and say, look, we are paying for this stuff. We are paying for this absolute clown show, this little clown car that drives up in front of the American public, opens a door, and a series of clowns just come rolling out, telling us all of this garbage, and they absolutely think that we're supposed to believe all of this. It's an insult to the intelligence of every single American. It's an insult. It's an insult to the intelligence of every lawmaker that all of us as voters have put in office. It is an absolute joke, and it is a travesty in how the Department of Defense, how the Pentagon, how the intelligence community, in particular the CIA, literally plays us for being a bunch of fools. And as I've said over and over again, this is not the America that any of us signed up for. This is certainly not the America our founding fathers intended. And when you have a Pentagon and the Central Intelligence Agency engaged in illegal activity, felonies, and none of these folks are being held accountable, you got to be kidding me. It is just the sheer fact that they have continued to lie to Congress. This is supposed to be a government by the people and for the people. It's not supposed to be a government run by the military-industrial complex and a group of 50-ish or so senior executive service or subject matter experts, these career bureaucrats that are running the show and deciding exactly what Congress should and should not know about, and for that matter, what the American people should or should not know about. It's all about money. It's all about covering their criminal activity. It is all about a lot of these folks making sure that they don't end up in a federal penitentiary. That is why all of this is going on. I mean, the more I have been told about what is going on, folks that hold security clearances, folks that hold top secret clearances, that have worked this topic either as part of their current job or as part of their previous billets, it's clear that you literally have a cancer on the United States of America in this sort of, I don't want to say shadow government because that sounds like a freaking conspiracy theory, but whatever, this kind of small group that is calling the shots. It is absolutely unacceptable. Now, yesterday I had the pleasure, along with the director of the executive director Yuan Feng of the UAP Disclosure Fund, of which I'm the director of strategy. We had a Reddit Ask Me Anything yesterday that both Yuan and I were privileged to be there to answer your questions regarding the UAP Disclosure Fund. And one of the main sort of recurring questions we get from people is what can I do? What can I do to move the ball? Because when you think about it, all of this can be very, very discouraging. We time and time again, we seem to be taking 2 steps forward and certainly one step back. And that seems to be the case. I know everyone was wildly disappointed when the Schumer amendment was shot down by Congressman Mike Turner, who crawled out from whatever rock he lives under at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and shot the whole thing down. That was certainly a big blow. All of us were very, very upset about that. But what I would say to all of you is that you have to keep hope. Just because you get knocked down doesn't mean you stay down. You get up and you keep fighting. So when Mike Turner or the rest of these clowns that are in the back pocket of private aerospace, and really telling them, what they should be doing and then they act on it, it's because of, the good old green, and not the other type of green, but the money green. It has to stop. But what I would say to folks that do get discouraged with all of this is, as Yuan pointed out, over I think what the past three or 4 years, thanks to Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Marco Rubio, and others, there has been some kind of UAP legislation that has become federal law. Something is passed. So it's not like we are dead in the water. It's not like nothing is happening. Things may not be happening as fast as we like. And, I know, speaking for myself, I'm often impatient with all of this as well. I want answers now. I want movement now. I want people in jail right now. And these sorts of things take time. And, another comment that I saw was actually regarding David Grush's op-ed. Now, I have no idea, what has happened, with the op-ed. But I can tell you that if the op-ed has not been published, I would say with very high confidence it is by design. As we know, the UAP issue is highly, highly fluid. And people such as David Grush, and I'm not speaking for him at all, people like David Grush, people like Lou Elizondo, people like Christopher Mellon, people like Colonel Carl Nell, at the end of the day, their focus is on accomplishing the mission. And as any war, any battle, the battlefield changes. And the battlefield is always in a state of flux. So David Grush and others, they are constantly readjusting what they are doing to be victorious in battle. So maybe that means that we do not get all of the goodies that we would like to see right away. Maybe there are strategic decisions being made that an op-ed may be super down the list in terms of importance. Maybe he has bigger fish to fry, and that an op-ed could interfere with that. I have no idea, but I would just say to all of you, be patient and cut these folks some slack. I think they are doing the best they can with the hand they are dealt. They are dealing with antibodies, as we like to call them, that are in vast numbers and are constantly adjusting their attack strategy to try and counter this. So just have a bit of understanding. I would ask all of you to consider, and I think it's going to happen. But going back to where I started from before I really went on my rant here, is go to UAP Disclosure Fund, UAPdisclosurefund.org. Lou Elizondo tweeted about this earlier. You don't need to donate money. All you need to do is sign the petition. When you sign the petition, this petition that is essentially saying, I, the American voter, we want you to do a Schumer 2.0. The American voter feels that this is important. So go to UAPdisclosurefund.org, sign that petition. This whole box full or case full or whatever petitions. These will go to Chuck Schumer, Mike Rounds, Kirsten Gillibrand, Young, and Heinrich. It is important that these politicians who have expended a considerable amount of political capital, their own political political capital. Political capital is not an infinite source. These politicians are expending an incredible amount of political capital on a topic that is riddled with ridicule, with stigma, with shame. I speak time and time again that that's a common topic of the debunker. The debunkers want you to feel ashamed to be asking questions about this. The debunkers want you to feel silly about asking questions about this. This is what they want. So when you look at these politicians and just the sheer political risk that they are taking in doing this for all of us that are demanding the truth, it is important that all of us as their constituents call up these lawmakers and say, thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Please, whatever staffer answers the phone, please pass on my thanks to Senator Gillibrand for doing what she is doing and has done on UAP transparency. Call up Chuck Schumer's office. Tell his staffer. Doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. This is beyond partisan. This is a nonpartisan issue. Call that staffer up and say, please pass on to the Senate Majority Leader that we are wildly appreciative that he is going to follow through with his promise to have a second Schumer amendment, and that it matters. And all of us that are watching at home, we support the bravery that our lawmakers, certain lawmakers, certainly not Mike Turner. We know what he's up to, Congressman Mike Turner. But these congressmen and women and these senators that are actually doing the right thing. I can tell you for a fact, members in certain Senate committees are wildly aware that the CIA has been engaged in illegal activity, that the Pentagon has been engaged in illegal activity, that the Pentagon and the CIA continues to lie to Congress. They know this. These folks are not stupid. They know exactly what is going on, and trust me, these folks are going to be held to account. And for anyone in the CIA and the Pentagon that's watching this, reconciliation, as I have said time and again, reconciliation will only go well for you if you do it now. If you continue to kick it down the road, kick the can down the road, kick the can down the road to the next administration or whatnot, you have another thing coming. You have a rude awakening coming. People are aware of the illegal activity, the un-American things that those of you that have been gatekeeping this thing and have really kind of sort of spread this cancer across our democracy. The American people will remember this, much in the same way I say to all of the nutty debunkers out there. The internet never forgets. So when all of this does come out in the full sunlight, and mark my words, it will. You can take it to the bank. People are going to remember what side of history you stood on. Doesn't matter if you're a debunker. Doesn't matter if you're a congressman, a woman. Doesn't matter if you're a senator. Doesn't matter if you're a SES person or HQS person in the government. History is going to remember what you did, and people are going to hold you to account. So keep that in mind when you're wrestling whether it's time to rip off the Band-Aid or not. And the other thing I will say, so I was at a sort of retreat not too long ago in another state that had many people from various parts of the government. These are all folks that are in the government. These are all folks with TSSCI clearance. These are all folks that have worked the UAP issue either in previous billets or as part of their current job. And what they are telling me unequivocally is the classified data says without a doubt this is non-human intelligence. Period. The end. No debate. This is what it is. These are multiple people in various three-letter agencies that I've had these conversations with. This is not a game. This is not some sort of a debunking fantasy or whatever. These are folks that have access to the classified data. They have seen the classified data. They have seen sensor data from multiple platforms. From a single event. It's not single source data. They are privy to this information, and they told me flat out, there is zero doubt, this is non-human intelligence. Zero doubt, exactly like Colonel Carl Nell said. So with that in mind, and the things that you've seen today, you know, when you're done with the show, I want you to just stop and just take all of this in and take in the amount of lies that all of you have been told by the American government. All of this is classified under the executive branch. It's in the same classification as continuity of government, COG operations, or presidential security. This thing is so buried, it's not even funny. It's buried in the Department of Energy. You saw Anna Paulina Luna hold the Department of Energy Secretary Granholm to account. And you saw her sweating bullets because she either didn't know what was going on, which is a very real possibility. I can tell you for sure, part of how all of this has been stuffed under the rug is it's not the elected officials that have been read into this or that have been gatekeeping it. It's the lower level. It's the deputy directors. It is the SES, Senior Executive Service or subject matter expert lifers that are 2 or 3 tiers below the Secretary of Defense or the Director of the CIA. Those are the people you have to look at because those are the people that have been gatekeeping this thing and hiding it and lying to Americans and worse yet, retaliating against Americans. Anna Paulina Luna, very last thing she asked the Department of Energy Secretary Granholm, do you work with JSOC? And if you haven't watched this interview or this hearing, I highly suggest you go and you check it out because you'll see her dance around, and you want to know the reason she danced around. She didn't want to answer the question. So JSOC stands for Joint Special Operations Command. So that is an element of the Department of Defense that manages and tasks missions for the Tier 1 operators, such as Navy SEALs and other operators like that. The reason she asked about that, I can tell you. So back in November, Christopher Sharp of the Liberation Times, myself, yours truly, and Josh Boswell, we ran a absolutely groundbreaking story in the Daily Mail that, of course, most of, if not all of the mainstream press completely ignored. And in this article, we laid out in black and white terms exactly how the CIA, the Directorate of Science and Technology, how the CIA, using this very secretive group called Office of Global Access. It's actually been renamed to something else, but I can't tell you what it is. Not my information to share. But what was called the Office of Global Access, an incredibly secretive unit run out of the CIA. That is the unit that handles all of the crash recovery operations. And guess what they do? They send JSOC off, Joint Special Operations Command, off with these teams to go and secure the crash sites and the recovery efforts. And also as well, now we didn't put it in the article, but the other information that came to us is that there is a rogue element of JSOC that has engaged in retaliation against whistleblowers. There are rogue elements of JSOC that have actually killed people. There are elements of JSOC that continue to harass and threaten whistleblowers. Lou Elizondo came on our show, or he didn't come on our show. He provided quotes about kinetic threats that they had received. So this stuff is going on. If it's not directly JSOC, it is former JSOC members that are working for the security contractors that are employed by these aerospace defense companies. I tell you, if members of Congress, and one of the things I learned during this trip is that this show is widely viewed by members of Congress and their staffers. I had multiple people from the government tell me this. And if I were Senator Gillibrand, or you're one of the staffers that I know, and I have good relationships with many of you in Senator Gillibrand's office, you need to, for this hearing, you need to bring as many folks from the board of directors from Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. You need to put them under oath and you need to ask them some very hard questions. You also need to find out what security contractors Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin, and we'll just say some others, use. And then you need to bring those folks from those security contractors, put them on the stand, put them on the oath. Ask them if they have any knowledge of or directed any operations that utilized wet works or any other sort of kinetic retaliation against whistleblowers or engineers or scientists or any person that has been part of a government contract related to the reverse engineering of non-human vehicles. Those are the people, folks in Congress, that you need to get on the stand and that you need to put under oath. And I'll say this as well. You need to get Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick on the stand, put him under oath, ask him who instructed him to violate national security protocols by talking about this stuff on Signal. You need to ask him whether he had a waiver to give contracts to his current employer, contracts that he was feeding money to while he was the director of Aero. You need to ask Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick under oath whether he was directed in any way, shape, or form by any member of the intelligence community or any government entity to lie to Congress and to write the sort of a joke of a report, historical report that he did. You need to get former director of the Office of Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, Ronald Moultrie, who, oh, by the way, was on the advisory board for Battelle Memorial Institute, which is Oak Ridge National Laboratories. You need to get him up there, put him under oath. I understand, members of Congress, that it is sort of not considered good decorum to put these officials under oath. But mark my words, they are going to continue to lie to your face unless you put them in a position where they can perjure themselves and risk imprisonment. That is the only way you're going to put enough heat on these folks to get them to come clean about what they're doing. Look, at the end of the day, our democracy is not some military junta run by the Pentagon. Our democracy is not based on 50-ish or so senior executive service level gatekeepers that are engaged in hiding this from all of us, lying about it, lying to Congress, subverting the Constitution of the United States, which is Congress is supposed to have congressional oversight of the executive branch, of the Pentagon, of the intelligence community. Everything that the Pentagon, the Department of Energy, the Central Intelligence Agency, the things that they have engaged on with this particular, with this topic, the topic of UFOs and UAPs, and this sort of history of cover-up and running a psychological operation on the American populace, and it is nothing short but a absolute perversion of democracy. There's nothing democratic about it. And when you have the Pentagon and the CIA throwing men and women under the bus that have worn the uniform in service to our country, I can't think of anything more un-American, more unpatriotic. Because at the end of the day, those of you that are doing it, you're doing it for money. And you're doing it to cover your ass because you know full well that many of you will end up in jail. And the only way this is going to come to an end is all of you that are watching this at home, you call your congressional representative and you tell them enough is enough. We're mad as hell and we're not going to take it any longer.